Chapter 2255. Lucio was once proud to the bone. When the glass sword appeared, he swept through the entire sword world. Almost no one could withstand the power of his sword. Even someone as outstanding as Loy couldn't withstand it. Back then, Lucio stood at the center of attention of the sword world. He was the idol of tens of thousands of sword cultivators, just like the current divine son of the sword world, Wuck. Of course, his pride wasn't arrogance, but confidence in his heart. However, all of this was destroyed with the appearance of Junimo. That day at the floating glass sword field became a nightmare in the depths of Lucio's heart. He almost fell and was crushed. God Lu's guidance for many years supported his muddle-headed life. However, this kind of life was no different from a zombie. It wasn't until his son was born that Lucio regained some faith, as if he saw some hope. Sadly, his son's innate soul was found to be lacking. This was another heavy blow to Lucio's heart and destroyed his hope. Now, all that was left was guilt and self-blame. He could be dispirited by himself, but he couldn't let his son be dispirited with him. Not only that, he had to show his strong side and give his son hope for the future. This was the responsibility of a father. From his father's point of view, Lucio understood God Lu's painstaking efforts. It was because of guilt and heartache that God Lu married the Mu clan to continue Lucio's bloodline. It was a pity that after 3 generations of effort and 2 god clans working together, they still couldn't break free from the pit created by the divine king's bloodline. Lucio wanted to wield the glass sword more than anyone else. However, under the shadow of the divine king's bloodline, he couldn't see any hope. Now, Qin Hao brought him hope. How could he not be excited? I once failed 51 times while practicing the Tao of reincarnation. The result was that all the souls in my hands were destroyed. My 4 teachers told me that helping you reconstruct your sword soul is different from reincarnation. However, I understand that fortune and misfortune are interdependent. There is the benefit of success, but there is also the legacy of failure. Perhaps if you can't summon the glass sword, this time you will never be able to wield it again. Qin Hao's expression was extremely solemn. He was an alchemist as well as a doctor. In fact, he understood the side effects of ineffective treatment better than Azura and the others. I don't regret it, and I won't blame you. Even if I fail and the sword spirit never appears again, even if I die, I won't blame you at all. Lucio reached out her trembling hand and grabbed Qin Hao's arm. She pleaded with her eyes, "Chu-san, help me." The Lucio who could not hold the glaze fan sword was not the Prince Lucio of the past. Instead of living a muddle-headed life for his parents, wife, and children, he wanted to live for himself again. In the world of the divine Tao, the strong were respected. Lucio, who was born in a divine master family, understood the principle of strength. All right, in a moment, I want you to disperse your sword will and focus on your sword spirit. I need you to use your will to construct the shape of the glaze sword, and then use the power of the filthy earth to materialize it into reality. Remember, the more focused your will is, the stronger your desire is, the closer the glaze sword spirit will be to its original form. This is also related to the success rate. Qin Hao reminded him again. And let's begin. Lucio let go of Qin Hao's arm and took a deep breath. He tried to calm himself down, and as the sword will dispersed, he closed his eyes and opened his psyche. Qin Hao nodded. Lucio was indeed a genius of the sword world. He was able to enter the state of mind quickly. This was not something an ordinary person could do. Then, Qin Hao slowly stretched out his palms, and the celestial wheel on his body opened up. The celestial veins lit up one after another, revolving around the celestial wheel. The 4 underworld divine powers filled the celestial wheel and gathered in his palms. At this moment, 2 pale white halos gradually emerged from his palms, emitting a mysterious and unfathomable aura. Qin Hao had no idea what innate Hell King's Edo soil looked like, as he had yet to refine the Edo soil into divine power. But these 2 pale white halos were the product of the fusion of life slaughter, bone force, ghost spirit, and soul origin. Then, Qin Hao stretched out his palms and pressed them on Lu Qiu's chest. As the celestial wheel spun rapidly, divine light shone from his palms. The dazzling brilliance enveloped the two people who were meditating. The space was sealed by an unparalleled pressure of creation. Qin Hao's consciousness controlled the embellished earth divine light to wander between Lu Qiu's flesh and consciousness. Because Lu Qiu had dispersed her sword intent and emptied her mind, there was no obstruction at all. At this time, he could clearly see Lu Qiu's physical condition. Qin Hao found that Lu Qiu's body was indeed severely damaged. Back then, Jun Mo destroyed Lu Qiu's sword soul with a finger. Although he didn't destroy Tian Luan's foundation, the finger had changed Lu Qiu's divine source completely. Qin Hao's psyche entered Lu Qiu's psyche world and hovered beside his divine source. He looked at the heart of the divine source in front of him. It was as if the heart had gone through a war between deity kings, turning it into a scorched earth in the outside world. The divine source that was supposed to be full of vitality and radiance was now like a rotten and withered heart without any signs of life. For so many years, Lu Qiu had been silently enduring this kind of pain, including that time when he used the world power of the Lu God's world to slash at the heavenly imperial army. It was also under the torment of pain that he unleashed that strike. After that, his entire body was paralyzed on the broken chariot. If not for the bloodline sealing the upper limit of your great Tao, you, who possess a perfect Tianlin, would definitely be an existence that could stand shoulder to shoulder with Wuk. You would be worthy of being the true Shensi of the sword world. With a sigh, Qin Hao's psyche floated towards the lifeless divine source. In a vast scorched earth, he finally saw a sprout that was like a small grass. It was buried deep under the scorched earth. This sprout was extremely weak. It was shrunken and yellowed. It was covered in wrinkles. Although it was buried deep under the scorched earth, it had been resisting the infection of the deity king's bloodline. It was trying its best to survive, as if it was dreaming of breaking free from the scorched earth and growing into a divine tree. Qin Hao understood that this was the manifestation of Lu Qiu's will. Lu Qiu had never given up and also dreamed of returning to his former self. Unfortunately, the damage caused by the deity king's bloodline was too great. It had already infected his entire divine source. How could soil without any vitality grow into a strong divine tree? I need to completely eliminate Jun Mo's divine power and remove the shackles. Only then will this sword heart grass have a chance to grow again. Qin Hao knew the method to reconstruct the sword soul. In the outside world, his original body was controlling the earth divine power in his palm to slowly penetrate Lu Qiu's body. Being invaded by an external force, Lu Qiu instinctively let out a muffled groan. However, he still maintained a clear mind. He muttered the name of the glazed sword. In his mind, in his psyche, the appearance of the glazed sword was clearly reflected. Under the influence of Lu Qiu's will, the withered grass sprout buried in the scorched earth actually emitted a hazy sword light. The light continued to spurt out, and there were faint signs of breaking out of the earth. This Lu Qiu's was really stubborn and strong. Go! Qin Hao gave a low shout. Close to 70,000 years of cultivation activated the divine power of the earth. This power was like a vast ocean that swept through the world. It passed through Lu Qiu's heavenly wheel through his two palms and entered his body. It was like a pale white tide that flooded the scorched earth. The earth divine power had the miraculous effect of transforming and extracting. After being baptized by the earth divine power, Qin Hao could extract Jun Mo's divine power and remove the barrier that trapped Lu Qiu. However, at this moment, Qin Hao's psyche flashed. Why did he have to eliminate Jun Mo's divine power? Couldn't he just leave it behind? The earth divine power can change the origin of all things. It is the only power that can harmonize and reverse the origin of all things. It also requires sufficient spirituality to perform reincarnation. Recalling the words of Azura and Nether, Qin Hao immediately stopped extracting the God King's bloodline power. He did not have to completely eliminate Junmo's divine power. He could even use the Earth divine power to merge Junmo's power into Lu Qiu's sword heartgrass and merge the two into one. In this way, would Lu Qiu's glass fan sword be stronger and sharper? This was an extremely dangerous idea. If the merging was not careful, Lu Qiu's fragile sword heartgrass would not only grow, but also be annihilated in an instant. Even worse, Lu Qiu's divine source would be destroyed. If the divine source was destroyed, Lu Qiu would be completely finished. However, Qin Hao believed in himself and thought that he could give it a try. After all, Lu Qiu said that he would not regret it and would rather die than become a cripple. Regathering the glass fan sword would at most allow Lu Qiu to return to the previous Prince Lu Qiu. However, after merging with the God King's bloodline power, would Lu Qiu open a wider door to the divine path and step onto the peak that God Lu, Dragon Lord, and Senior Wu Jian could only dream of? You have entrusted your life to me. I will not betray your trust. I will endure 1,000 years of pain for you and give you a better future. Having made up his mind, Qin Hao immediately got to work. He suddenly became excited, just like when he had carved the dragon spirit Dharma idol, full of passion. Just in case, Qin Hao silently injected a ball of tranquil water into Lu Qiu's body. The water turned into a spring and stabilized Lu Qiu's divine body. It then separated and floated towards the divine source. It fell into the scorched earth and wrapped around the sword heartgrass, protecting this fragile sword heartgrass. Next, it was time to show off. Qin Hao used his divine telekinesis and the nether Dao divine power that he had accumulated over the past 70,000 years gathered into a vast ocean that swept toward Lu Qiu's heart of the God Source. In an instant, the God Source that was covered in scorched earth was completely enveloped by the pale white light of the earth of filth. Creak. In the outside world, Lu Qiu's head was covered in cold sweat. He seemed to be in great pain. The pain was tearing his soul apart. He clenched his hands that were covered with blue veins. His cross-legged body trembled under Qin Hao's palm. Qin Hao could feel Lu Qiu's pain, so he tried his best to be as gentle as possible. He was multitasking. While using the tranquil water to protect the sword heartgrass, he was also constantly cleansing it. This made the sword's soul, which was already pure in sword force, even more exquisite and pure. Merge. Qin Hao pushed with his left palm, and Lu Qiu lost his balance. His body spun on the spot along with Qin Hao's palm. In his body, the boundless earth divine light merged into the scorched earth. It was like smoke and dust blown up by the wind. The divine power left behind by the bloodline of the divine king turned into dense particles and was kneaded into a ball of divine light of the great path in the storm. It exuded a supreme aura and pressure. Wrapped in the halo of the earth divine light, Qin Hao controlled this ball of tyrannical brilliance and began to merge into the fragile sword heartgrass. It was very slow. If there was even the slightest abnormality, he would immediately stop. Buzz. As soon as the light that exuded the bloodline of the divine king came into contact with the fragile sword heartgrass, a scream came from Lu Qiu's mouth. The sound was so loud that it was as if the sword heartgrass had been shattered by Junmo. The pain was unbearable. But with just one scream, Lu Qiu gritted his teeth and stopped. He listened to Qin Hao's instructions, and his mind was full of his glazed fan sword. Under the influence of his will, the sword heartgrass that was being merged also erupted with a strong desire to live. Its flickering luster became more and more intense. It actually gave up resisting and began to take the initiative to accept the power of the bloodline of the divine king. From the situation, it seemed like it was sucking in rain and began to devour the light of the divine king's bloodline that approached it. Lu Qiu is really good. It seemed that Qin Hao's worry was overdone. The sword will and the will of the divine king did not clash for the first time, so he was more at ease and dared to do it. Using his divine consciousness to control the earth divine king, he constantly pressed the light of the divine king into the sword heartgrass. The effect of the earth divine transformation came into effect, In addition to Lucio's own tenacious will and strong desire to live, the two will actually merge bit by bit in Qin Hao's perception. Chapter 2256. Innate deity kings were awakened in the chaos. Their bloodline Tao was incredibly strong, containing the will of the Tao. Ordinary living beings would not be able to withstand it, let alone fusing with it. However, the deity Earth was able to harmonize and transform the power of all things. Under Qin Hao's control, Lucio's divine source that was left behind by Jun Mo actually started to fuse with his sword spirit. The entire process was slow, and every breath was torture. Lucio was drenched in cold sweat, gritting his teeth as if he was sitting on a bed of needles. The excruciating pain made every second feel like an eternity to him, but with his strong will and hope, he managed to survive. This was also a difficult test for Qin Hao. When the noble divine king's Tao light ball was gradually swallowed by the sword heart grass until it was completely absorbed, the fragile grass bud burst out with extremely holy light, illuminating Lucio's damaged heart of the source of God. It was like a seed that had been buried in the soil for a long time, waiting for sweet dew, waiting for an unexpected rainstorm. The scarce resources became unprecedentedly abundant. Under such conditions, the sword heart grass started to grow rapidly, bringing with it its unique sword light, like a huge sword tree that grew taller and taller, spreading its branches all over Lucio's heart. When the barrier that was suppressing the heart was removed, a layer of sword Tao light quickly spread across the scorched earth under the tree until it regained its strong heartbeat. Wong. From Lucio's chest, there was a shocking vibration of power. In the dazzling light, the towering divine tree finally condensed into a sword, an incomparably sharp and peerless divine sword. It was only at this moment that the creation light that shrouded Qin Hao and Lucio in the outside world completely disappeared. It's done. Qin Hao moved his hand away from Lucio's body and wiped the sweat off his face. He smiled and said, "Come, try your reborn glass fan sword." As he spoke, he stood up, but Lucio did not move. He lowered his head and sat on the ground with his fists clenched tight. "What's wrong?" asked Qin Hao. Did he fail? That was impossible. Through his spiritual will, he saw with his own eyes that the sword heart grass had condensed into an extremely sharp sword soul. The sword soul looked exactly the same as the glaze fan sword. I don't really believe that this is real. It's not a dream, right? When Lucio raised her head, her eyes were filled with tears. When Qin Hao saw this, he heaved a sigh of relief and said, "Believe me, this is not a dream. You have a sword spirit, quickly give it a try." Yes. Lucio stood up. Qin Hao did not know if it was an illusion, but the moment Lucio stood up, he felt that Lucio was like a giant. Li Fan. Lucio whispered the name of the sword spirit and flicked his palm to the side. A dazzling light appeared in his palm and condensed into a life weapon. When he held the glass again, he could feel the familiar blood vessels in his palm. Lucio trembled in excitement, and his temperament changed greatly. There was no longer any trace of depression on his face, and only strong confidence was left in his eyes. "Prince Lucio of the past has returned," Qin Hao said quietly. Then, Lucio held the sword and slashed at the void. The Li Fan in his palm suddenly burst with dazzling light, and a sharp ray of light flew out and cut all the way. It actually split the entire sword domain into two distinct parts. However, it was different from before. As the ray of light flew, it seemed to roll up a supreme power that was extremely oppressive. It was as if a monarch's will had descended, and it could naturally suppress all things, making all creatures instinctively fear and submit when facing the sword Qi. Swoosh! The sword light flew past, heading toward a roaming dragon in the distance. Long Mo transformed into his original form, and his 5 claws stepped on a dragon sword. He was enjoying himself in the reincarnation field. He was very intoxicated with the feeling of being surrounded by the reincarnation great path. He did not need to do anything, and he only needed to maintain his own dragon will, and it would automatically become stronger through the reincarnation field. This feeling was too wonderful. He could strengthen his divine power and cultivation without cultivating, and his divine meridians were freely growing in this environment. It turned out that there were really good things in this world that did not require any effort. No wonder Jun Mo was so greedy for the reincarnation mirror. However, suddenly, Long Mo, who was flying on his sword, opened his languid eyes. His dragon eyes were so wide that 2 mountains could be stuffed in. A ray of light was reflected in his eyes. It was so sharp. As his former lover, his old rival in the Great Path Sword Realm, how could he not recognize that it was the Leaf Fawn? Roar! With a leap, Long Mo got into a defensive position. His dragon head roared, and a torrential sound wave roared toward the sword light that was cutting toward him. True dragon roar. When the tyrannical dragon roar shook, it swept through the entire sword domain, and the void space trembled. The sound wave swept toward the many places of cultivation in the reincarnation field. Immediately, the dragon roar collided with the sharp ray of light that cut through the sword domain. The strongest bloodline superpowers of the 2 god clans in the Great Path Sword Realm clashed. The old rivals who had been on par with each other in the past had undergone a drastic change at this moment. Long Mo watched as the true dragon roar that he had roared out was cut in half by the ray of light. What kind of sword chi was this? It was the Leaf Fawn, but it was also not the Leaf Fawn. What was it exactly? It was simply absurd. Then, Long Mo watched in despair as the ray of light cut through. He did not know why, but when the sword chi flew over, he seemed to be instinctively suppressed. Although it was only for a short while, this suppressed aura affected Long Mo, causing his will to be in a trance for a moment. He seemed to be afraid. Then, the sword really cut into Long Mo's body. The powerful defense of the Dragon Clan was ineffective under the sharp sword chi. A 10-foot-long bloody wound was branded on Long Mo's dragon body as he roared angrily, causing his dragon scales to shatter. The tyrannical impact sent him flying thousands of feet away, spilling dragon blood everywhere. Lucio F***CKU. Long Mo was like a twisted loach, almost falling. He cursed in anger. What a shocking sword will. Heavens, what's going on? Leaf Fawn, Prince Lucio, one figure after another flew over from different directions in the sword domain. The swordsmen of the 3 realms looked at Lucio, who stood proudly with an unparalleled blade in his hand, and all of them were dazed. If they did not know what had happened to Lucio in the past, which caused his will to be depressed for thousands of years, everyone would have suspected that the sword god in front of them was actually Prince Lucio, whose sword soul had been destroyed. I'm back. Lucio suppressed the excitement in his heart and spoke to everyone in the calmest tone. Chapter 2257. Translator, Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation, congratulations, 6th Prince. Everyone saluted. Congratulations, Prince Lucio. Li Guangxing was shocked and happy for Lucio. At the same time, he glanced at Qin Hao and found that Qin Hao looked very weak. He understood what had happened. The sword spirit in Lucio's hand must have been regenerated by Qin Hao using his divine power. If you want to reconstruct the sword spirit, so be it. Why did you attack me? Are you crazy? Amidst the screams, Long Mian wriggled his injured dragon body over. He stood in the middle of the crowd, and the bloody 3-meter-long wound on his body was painful to look at. I'm sorry, Long Miao. I want to try the feeling of holding the sword spirit again. You and I are the closest here, so I can only try it on you, Lucio said apologetically. Long Miao was speechless. Boy, your sword is very sharp. A burly figure descended. When Mo2 appeared, the sword field immediately changed. A large amount of murderous aura poured in. The strong smell of blood made the swordsman uncomfortable. Mo2 only appeared because he sensed the difference in sword will. It was obvious that Lucio, who had found himself again, was very powerful. Prince Lu, let me take your sword, Vivian said to Lucio. Vivian said to Lucio, Affected by the sword and Long Majin's dragon roar, the people who were cultivating in the transmigration ground all rushed over. Okay, Yue, be careful, but with your talent and the strength of your celestial wheel. Lucio glanced at the wound on Long Miao's body that was still bleeding. Forget it. Let's not talk about it. Long Miao, please use your full strength, Vivian said seriously. As her hair fluttered in the wind, the dazzling light of the great path surrounded her tall and slender figure. Her aura and figure were perfectly outlined. Above the light of the wheel, for divine meridians surrounded her, each filled with the power of light. Mo2 and the other Slaughter World divine generals and divine guards, as well as the Ghost Guards, Yellow Spring Bone Guards, and Soul Guards, hated Vivian's aura. Although they didn't say anything because of Qin Hao, the four world divine generals and divine guards all retreated. Be careful. Lucio's eyes narrowed. He didn't dare to be the slightest bit careless when exchanging blows with a perfect heavenly wheel. He also didn't let his sword spirit get to his head. After all, his sword spirit was easily destroyed by a perfect heavenly wheel back then. Lucio would never forget this kind of pain. Vivian didn't say anything else. The light on her wheel became more and more dazzling, and a divine sword of light of judgment appeared in her hand. The virtuous woman in front of Qin Hao didn't show any gentleness when she fought with others. Swoosh! Lucio slashed his sword towards Vivian. His celestial wheel exploded in the sword light. He also had 4 divine veins revolving around him. In terms of cultivation, the two of them were very close. The only difference was that Vivian's celestial wheel was perfect. Go! Vivian shouted softly. The power of light in her palm flourished, sweeping out a beam of divine light. This beam of light seemed to be able to purify all the filth in the world, judge all the sins, and make all the ugliness have nowhere to hide. As Vivian made her move, Mo2's face became even more distorted in the distance. The warriors of the underworld hated the power of light the most and feared it the most. In Vivian's aura, there was a faint trace of the divine king of light. In terms of brilliance, Vivian was naturally far inferior to the divine king. After all, the power of light was divided into thousands of types, and the power of each type was different. However, Mo2 could feel that the light on Vivian's body was the closest to that of the divine king of light. This kind of extremely divine was naturally very lethal to the creatures of the underworld. It was the bane of the Ghost Way, the Soul Way, the Bone Way, and also the Slaughter Way. The Four Realms Tao couldn't do anything in front of the extremely pure and divine light. Swoosh! The two beams of sword Qi collided. The light beam that seemed to be able to cut through all things was silently melted the moment it came into contact with the light beam. However, Vivian also snorted and took a step back. The sword Qi of light dissipated midway. Then, she shook her head. Just now, she felt an extremely oppressive will affect her sword will. She knew that it was because Lucio's sword will had locked on her. This Prince Lu was indeed extraordinary. His sword will had the aura of a desolate monarch. In the past, when Vivian was in the sword world, she had heard of Lucio's story from others. However, in her eyes, Lucio was just a very ordinary person and a very ordinary father. It was not an exaggeration to say that he was mediocre. However, at this moment, she saw the real Lucio. He was very similar to the rumors in the sword world. His sword will was very strong. Perhaps only Wuk could suppress this person with his sword will. What a terrifying light attribute. Lucio was also shocked. He subconsciously looked at the glazed sword in his hand. His sword Qi was actually melted by Vivian's light. For a moment, Lucio suspected that the sword soul in his hand was fake. Seems like the sword soul remodeling is very successful. Qin Hao said with a smile. The deity king bloodline power left behind by Jun Mo had indeed strengthened the glazed sword. When Lucio released the sword Qi, he did feel Jun Mo's aura. To be more precise, it was the innate deity king's will. Although it was weak, it was enough to affect many people. Chu San, what kind of sword soul did you remodel for him? This is definitely not what the glazed sword should look like. Long Miao shook his body and turned into his human form. He held Zwalai with one hand and grimaced in pain. He knew very well that Lucio's previous glass fan sword, even in its peak state, would not be able to cut through his true dragon howl and leave such a heavy wound on his body. Yes, Chu-san, I also feel that the sword soul is different from before. Lucio was puzzled. He was the clearest about the strength of the sword soul. Although the glazed sword was sharp, it was not as strong as this. Now, he felt that among the immortal level cultivators, those who were on the same level as him were no match for him. Even Vivian with her perfect Tianlun was no match for him. You didn't do anything. Maybe it's the result of your 1,000 years of accumulation and awakening. Qin Hao smiled mysteriously. He would not tell Lucio that the sword soul was mixed with Junmo's power. That would hurt Lucio. Using the enemy's power would make Lucio feel ashamed. You little brat. Lucio shook his head and smiled. Suddenly, an idea appeared in his mind. He looked at Qin Hao excitedly and said, "Do you want to take on my attacks too?" With the same level of cultivation, it was not difficult for Lucio to fight with an immortal level Tianlun now. He could even contend with Vivian with her perfect Tianlun. Of course, the fight was not a life and death battle. If it was a life and death battle, he might not be a match for the perfect Tianlun, but at least he would not be like Junimo in the past. He was absolutely confident that even if the perfect Tianlun wanted to defeat him, he would have to pay a heavy price. However, the same talent and cultivation in different people would bring out different strengths. For example, Qin Hao. Qin Hao's combat power was extremely strong. This originated from his perception of the way and the use of his divine power. He had been honed through many life and death experiences. In the past, Lucio was very optimistic about Qin Hao. He understood that Qin Hao was not as good as Wuck in terms of the purity of sword will. However, in terms of the control of sword will, Qin Hao was even above Wuck. Junimo was dead. The successor of the Divine King had died in the hands of Qin Hao. Today, Qin Hao could be said to be standing at the peak of the perfect Tianlun. Then, when Qin Hao faced the reshaped glazed fan sword, what would happen? Lucio wanted to know the answer. After all, Qin Hao had killed his nightmare, Junimo. Chapter 2258. Translator. Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation Translator. Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation. Everyone looked at Qin Hao in unison. Lucio regained his confidence, and his sword spirit was even more powerful than before. He wanted to test his sword against Qin Hao. Back then, if Junimo had not interfered, there would have been a battle between Prince Lucio and Chu-san. Li Guangxing sighed. During the Three Realms sword competition at the floating glaze field, the three divine lords had sent their descendants to fight. They wanted to use the strongest bloodline to decide the future of the sword world. Loi was no match for Lucio. According to the situation, the college would have sent Qin Hao. Unfortunately, Junimo had descended from the sky and messed up the training ground, so no one could see the result. Lucio must have felt regretful. That was why he took the initiative to test his sword against Qin Hao to fulfill his wish back then. No need. I have used up a lot of energy to reconstruct the sword spirit. I don't have any extra energy now. Qin Hao smiled tiredly. Bear with it. Lucio begged. Qin Hao had a foundation of nearly 70,000 years. Even if he had used up a lot of energy, it was more than enough to deal with a deity-level expert with 4 divine veins. Lucio did not care about the result. He just wanted to test his sword. All right then. Qin Hao waved at Lucio helplessly, signaling him to make his move. Lucio's expression became more serious. As a celestial wheel revolved, his 4 divine veins shone brightly. Pure sword will flowed through his body. The glazed blade in his palm slashed at Qin Hao. Swish! With one slash, the sharp light cut through everything. It flew forward, and the air was suddenly filled with the aura of a sovereign. There! Qin Hao raised his palm. Light flashed quickly on his body. He did not use any divine power. As a glazed blade, Qi slashed at him, he pointed at it with his finger. Crack! A clear, shattering sound rang out and was clearly transmitted to everyone's hearts. Everyone's eyes widened as they saw that the flying ray of light immediately collapsed and dissipated the moment it came into contact with Qin Hao's finger. This! Li Guangxing was dumbfounded. He didn't use his divine power, divine spells, or divine weapons. He destroyed the glaze sword Qi with just his physical body. Although everyone knew that there was a big gap between Lu Qiu and Qin Hao, it was still too outrageous. Lu Qiu's face twisted. He had just regained his confidence from Long Miao and Vivian, but now it was crushed by Qin Hao. This sword strike made Lu Qiu feel like he was facing Jun Mo in the past. He felt powerless. Qin Hao was like a mountain whose peak could not be seen. He stood in front of Lu Qiu, completely unshakable. I feel good now. I'll let you chop me, Long Mian muttered. When he looked at Qin Hao, his gaze was extremely complicated and faintly revealed a hint of pain. This was simply too strong. Long Miao believed that even if his father and God Lu were present, they would not be able to defeat Qin Hao. Thinking back to the Sea Festival in Kunlun, he and Lu Qiu stood in front of Qin Hao and could slightly look down on him. But now, the gap between them was too big. No wonder you are the top of the top heavens wheel. I, Lu Qiu, am convinced. The disappointment in Lu Qiu's eyes disappeared in a flash. He immediately recovered and smiled bitterly as he dispersed the life implement in his hand. It seemed that even though they were both perfect heavenly wheels, there was still a considerable gap between them. Qin Hao could even kill the successor of the Divine King, Jun Mo. Now, not to mention Lu Qiu, even in the entire Chaos Divine world, it would be difficult for him to find an opponent even among the many divine princes. Don't doubt yourself. The gap between us is too big. Qin Hao comforted and looked at everyone. Everyone continued to cultivate. The divine path is vast and boundless. There are many strange things that we don't know, especially those great gods under the Divine King. I hope that in the future, everyone can stand side by side with the great gods. Li Guangxing and the others nodded. They understood that although Qin Hao was encouraging them, there were very few heaven's wheels in the untainted land who could really become great gods. However, cultivation always had a goal. Immediately, everyone dispersed and continued to cultivate. The reincarnation dojo had a heaven-defying effect. It could allow one to be in the great Tao reincarnation to improve their divine power and cultivation. Everyone cherished it. Qin Hao also left the sword domain and opened up an independent small space to begin cultivating. Now Lu Qiu is stronger than me. It's getting harder and harder to survive. Long Miao looked in the direction where Qin Hao disappeared. He frowned and thought about whether he should be ruthless enough to destroy the dragon soul and use Qin Hao's hands to cast Emo 2 reconstruction. Maybe then, he could become stronger like Lu Qiu. With a thought, the environment around Qin Hao changed. A cloud of black haze spread out, turning into an independent space that gradually enveloped Qin Hao. He had already helped Lu Qiu reconstruct the sword soul and completed God Lu's task. It was considered as repaying the sword domain's kindness. Next, Qin Hao also needed to find the two divine powers that he had lost: the Red Lotus Overlord Fire and the Power of Space. When he first came to the Massacre world, in order to protect himself and hide his identity, he had to personally destroy the two divine powers. The Red Lotus Overlord Fire had been with him for a lifetime. The Power of Space was condensed by him in the Academy. Both of them were very significant. The divine powers could be destroyed, but the source of the Tao was hidden in the heaven's wheels. As long as he condensed it again, he could still cultivate it back. Helping Lu Qiu reconstruct the sword soul must be very tiring, right? Just as the light of Massacre sealed his body, Vivian jumped in and faced Qin Hao. She brushed her hand and wiped the sweat on his face. When her soft skin touched his, a delicate fragrance wafted over. Qin Hao couldn't help but hold Vivian's waist with one hand. As she whimpered, he kissed her soft lips. "We've been seen." Vivian pushed Qin Hao's shoulders with her small hands. There were people everywhere in the transmigration field. Just the 4 realms of the underworld alone had tens of thousands of people. She didn't want to put on a show with Qin Hao in front of others. Old man is already an old wife. So what if they see us? Qin Hao kissed her again. Bad guy. Vivian retreated and quickly escaped from his evil hands. She said, "Have you ever thought of helping the poor child of the Liu family to reconstruct a sword soul?" Liu Qiu had become the high-spirited 6th prince of the past. However, his son was affected by the bloodline of the divine king, causing him to be born without a life spirit. There was a huge difference between having a life spirit and not having one. Hearing this, Qin Hao's expression became more serious. He rubbed his chin and said, "That's true. However, Liu Qiu and his son's situation are different. It's easy to reconstruct a sword soul for the little guy, but it's also difficult." The glazed fan sword was Liu Qiu's life spirit. He was born with it. However, his son didn't have a life spirit. It was not easy to find a powerful and compatible sword soul. It depended on luck. "Then let's find one." Vivian smiled and said, "You're so capable. It's not my business. Wuck is the god of the sword world. He should do it. It's still early. Let's continue." Qin Hao straightened up. Vivian quickly dodged. "Don't be so indecent. I'm a very decent person. I'm only indecent to my wife." "Then go find little Han." Qin Hao's movement stiffened. He stopped chasing and playing. His expression darkened. "It's my fault." Vivian realized that she had said something wrong. Qin Hao shook his head. "Have you thought about when to bring Lil Han back?" Vivian took 2 steps forward and pulled Qin Hao's arms. She wrapped his arms around her slender waist. "It should be soon." Qin Hao raised his head, and a cunning smile appeared on his face. He pounced on Vivian and pressed her under his body. Vivian, who was as pure as the goddess of light, struggled and sealed the space with the pitch-black light. Heavy glory, divine realm. There were 99 levels of heaven in the Chonhua divine court, and each level was occupied by a god clan. Looking at the Chonhua divine realm from the untainted land, it was like a huge mountain that was shining with radiance. The mountain was surrounded by hills, and they were arranged in an orderly manner, especially after the 90th level of the heavy glory divine realm. From a 90th to the 98th level, the divine clan was very powerful. The 99th level was regarded as a forbidden area. The peak of the mountain was occupied by only one person. He was called the Heavy Glory Immortal King. The 98th level was occupied by the Heavy Glory Divine Clan, an Immortal King clan. The Moonflow clan was second only to the Heavy Glory Divine Clan. They controlled the 97th level of heaven and looked down on the 96 divine clans below the Heavy Glory Divine Realm. It could be seen that the Moonflow clan was very powerful. They were the only 2 overlords of the Heavy Glory Divine Realm. At this moment, in the core area of the Moonflow clan, the Heavenly Palace. This was the Heavenly Palace of the clan's great elder, Moon God Tian. In front of the palace gate, divine guards stood in great numbers. Many of the palaces in the palace were guarded by divine generals. In the inner courtyard of the Heavenly Palace, there was a palace that was very special. It was not like the other palaces that were guarded by powerful divine generals. In this palace, there was not a single soldier. Its design was elegant and unique. It was surrounded by immortal forests. A clear river flowed through the entire palace. On the bank of the immortal river, there were cute and precious beasts eating. The whole scene was as beautiful as a painting. In a jade pavilion by the river, a fairy sat upright. Her beautiful features were slightly melancholic. She held her chin with one hand, revealing her longing. Although she was sitting in the depths of the celestial palace, it was unknown where her soul had drifted to. "Are you thinking about him again?" A beautiful woman in a gorgeous palace dress walked over leisurely. Without the other party noticing, she sat down opposite her with a smile. Looking at her daughter's infatuated face, the beloved daughter of the Moon Flow clan's great elder, Yu Yuanyu, reached out and pinched the tip of Xiao Han's delicate nose. "Silly girl." Mother." Xiao Han came to her senses and smiled sheepishly. "Alas, our mother really has the same hard life." Yu Yuanyu sat beside Xiao Han and held Xiao Han's head in her arms. She combed her hair with her hands and complained, "Back then, I was afraid of scaring your father, so I didn't dare to use any of my divine power. I pretended to be a pitiful little girl. If it weren't for those traitors, I'm afraid that Xiao Yi would still be in the dark." Huh. Yu covered her mouth and chuckled. Her posture was dignified, and her laughter was very pleasant, with a hint of complacency. Back then, she was pregnant with Xiao Han. Before giving birth, she slaughtered all the traitors who chased after Xiao Yi. That scene made Xiao Yi dumbstruck. He looked at her as if he had seen a ghost. No. It was more appropriate to say that he had seen a fairy descending to the mortal world. Hateful, that stubborn old man at home had found the hidden continent in the vast, untainted land, tracked her all the way, and forcibly took her away. Yu had been very worried. She was afraid that if she left, Xiao Yi would gradually grow old and die. After all, that was the abandoned god's continent where the divine path had been severed. The strongest martial emperors only had a lifespan of 2,000 years. Fortunately, Xiao Han had also been taken back by Yu Xintian. Yu didn't know whether to be happy or sad. Xiao Han's arrival had let her know about Xiao Yi's situation. The sad thing was that he had experienced the same thing as her. He was separated from his beloved and could only stay in the supreme palace of the heavy splendor divine realm. He was like a canary in a cage, unable to break free. "Mother, I miss him." Xiao Han raised her head and said. She silently calculated the time. She had been separated from Qin Hao for 1,000 years. She had never left Qin Hao's side for such a long time. Even in the divine wilderness continent, it had only been 20 years since she left Qin Hao's side. 1,000 years. In the mortal world of the past, it was simply unimaginable. She really missed Qin Hao. She missed him very much, especially when she thought of the sword world being sealed by the divine king's army every night. She didn't dare to continue imagining what would happen next. Because of this, Xiao Han woke up from nightmares several times. She dreamed that Qin Hao's body had been pierced by divine techniques, and his soul had been destroyed by the laws. She didn't know how many times she had cried herself awake. Fortunately, not long after, her uncle Yu Yuanjin secretly told her that Qin Hao was fine. With the help of the sword world, he had miraculously escaped from the divine king's army. If not for this, Xiao Han didn't know how she would have survived the past 1,000 years. "I miss your father too. Unfortunately, your foolish father isn't as capable as my son-in-law." Yu helped Xiao Han up and gently patted her little face with both hands. Over the past 1,000 years, she had heard a lot of stories about Qin Hao from Xiao Han. Although she had never seen him in person, she knew that Qin Hao was extraordinary and a man of great fortune just by hearing those soul-stirring stories. "Mother, did Uncle help me find Brother Qin Hao's whereabouts?" Xiao Han asked worriedly. "Not yet." Yu shook her head weakly. She had asked her brother Yu Yuanjin several times, but the untainted land was too big. The primeval realm didn't allow the outside world's heavenly wheel experts to set foot in it. It was difficult for Yu Yuanjin to follow the vine to find the melon from the Tianzhou divine domain. "Where is he? Is he hurt? Did he suffer? Mother, I'm really scared." Xiao Han's eyes reddened as she spoke. She nervously held Yu Yu's hands. "Don't worry. As long as he's alive, your uncle will find out the news sooner or later. However, there's one thing you need to pay special attention to." Yu Yu's face flashed with anger and coldness as she spoke. "What is it?" Xiao Han asked. "The Yuetian sky is preparing for a debate. All the young talents in the clan can participate. He even invited the 9 divine clans of the upper 9 heavens." Yu Yu's tone was extremely solemn. "What does this have to do with me?" Xiao Han didn't understand. "Silly girl, there are indeed many debates in the resplendent divine realm, but almost none of the cultivation battles of the upper 9 heavens are invited. Every time this happens, something big will happen. What's more, he only invited the young talents of the 9 divine clans. Don't you understand?" Yu sighed. The great elder of the Yuetian clan clearly wanted to choose a good son-in-law for his granddaughter. He wanted to choose the best one from the 9 divine clans of the upper 9 heavens. Chapter 2259. There were 99 layers in the heavy glory divine realm. Each layer was stronger than the last, and each layer was guarded by a divine master. There were countless planes under the command of a divine master. In the entire heavy glory divine realm, Tao battles happened almost every day, so it was not strange at all. However, Tao battles in the upper 9 layers were extremely rare. Every time this happened, the 9 strongest clans would definitely move up and down. Perhaps the 96th layer would challenge the 97th layer, or the 95th layer would challenge the 96th layer, and so on. The stronger clans would rise up, while the weaker clans would fall down a layer. Strength was everything. Over the long years, the 9 clans' positions were basically fixed, and very rarely could they be shaken. The Moonflow clan was the second strongest clan, second only to the Heavy Glory Immortal Kings clan. This was more than enough proof of the Moonflow clan's strength. The clan had 2 divine masters. Whether it was the Moonflow clan leader or Great Elder Yushentian, both of them had touched upon the power of primordial chaos, and their Tao was extremely terrifying. Now, Yushentian was holding a Tao battle and calling upon all the upper 9 layers to participate, but it was only limited to the younger generation. His intentions were clearly targeted. Could it be that he wants to? This is absolutely absurd. I'm already married, and I'm his mother. How could he do this? Xiaohan leapt to her feet. Besides disbelief, there was also anger on her face. Yushentian had always been powerful and domineering, and they only worked with the strong. However, Xiaohan would definitely not agree to this. The marriage of a Moonflow clan woman had to be tested by the clan's elders. Although Qin Hao had not been tested, he was the lover that Xiaohan wanted to spend the rest of her life with. Yushentian wanted Xiaohan to remarry. This was not only an insult to Xiaohan, it was also an insult to Qin Hao. Moreover, it would also hurt others. It was absolutely absurd. Daughter, you don't understand your grandfather at all. He's always been this kind of person. Yu Yuanyu's expression was filled with coldness when he thought of her unreasonable father. Choosing a Tao partner for Xiaohan through a Tao battle was indeed too humiliating. Generally speaking, women would only consider remarrying if they had lost their spouse. However, Qin Hao might still be alive right now, but Xiaohan was not yet dead. As her grandfather, he had actually started to openly choose a husband for his granddaughter. Moreover, he had done it with great fanfare and held it in the upper 9 tiers. No matter who it was, they would feel extremely unbalanced. However, Yushentian did not see it that way. In the eyes of an expert, to be able to become the son-in-law of the 97th heavenly layer of the reincarnation divine realm, to be able to become the grandson-in-law of the Moonflow clan's great elder Yushentian, no matter who it was, they should feel pride and honor from the bottom of their heart. If not for the fact that Xiaohan was already married, according to the style of the moon goddess heaven, he might have even sent out invitations to the other divine kings and invited those divine princes to participate. There was no other reason than the fact that Moon Shintian was strong enough. He had the qualifications to do so. Only the descendants of god kings were worthy of his flesh and blood. As for Qin Hao, how could an ant be worthy of Phoenix? Acknowledging Qin Hao as his son-in-law would be an insult to the moon goddess sky. He was a grand quasi-god king level expert who had comprehended the primordial grand Tao. How could he allow his descendant to marry an unremarkable and ordinary person? That would be too shameful for the Moonflow clan. I don't agree. Even if I die, I won't agree. Xiaohan shouted angrily. She was gnashing her teeth, showing the anger she had never felt before. At this moment, a wheel of light was faintly discernible around her body. Her 3 holy veins shone like the holy moonlight. Her divine will was perfect, forming a universe of its own. For the perfect Yanluan and 30,000 years of cultivation, she had suffered too much. She even risked her life to beg reincarnation immortal king to accept the life and death calamity from an innate deity king. In order to obtain the power of the 5 divine veins, Martial Lord had released his divine intent 4 times. Each time, he would be reborn from the destruction of his divine source. How could Xiao Han's 2 heavenly tribulations be inferior to martial lords? Not for anything else, but for Qin Hao. She had had enough of being powerless. She didn't want to be a burden to her lover anymore. She wanted to be like before. When danger came, she wanted to be qualified to shoulder it by Qin Hao's side. But Qin Hao didn't know this. But Xiao Han's hard work had become the basis for Moon Shintian to show off. Right now, all of the disciples of the god race in the upper 9 heavens knew just how great Xiao Han's potential was. Their eyes burned with passion as they looked at her, all of them hoping to marry her. "Daughter, I'm afraid this is not up to you." Yu pulled Xiao Han down and patted her hand to comfort her. If Xiao Han hadn't forged her Tianlun, even if her Tianlun's grade was lower, none of this would have happened. It was precisely because Xiao Han was too outstanding that the Moon Shintian geniuses, who had always admired strength, saw value in her. That was why Yu's heart ached. Xiao Han's hard work was all for Qin Hao. One had to know that in the upper 9 layers, no one had been able to safely pass through the Immortal King's tribulation. There had been the past, but they had all died. Xiao Han had endured it twice. Even Immortal King Chonghua was deeply shocked by her potential. That was why the Immortal King had ordered that Xiao Han not be restricted to the 99 layers. As long as she was willing, she could go up and seek the Tao at any time. Who in the current upper 9 heavens had such qualifications? Even the descendants of the Immortal King who controlled the 98 layers, the patriarch of the 97th layer, and the great elder Moon Shintian, had to report to the Immortal King if they wanted to meet him. Xiao Han could directly step through the Chonghua Gate and go up to the 99 layers. "Mother!" Xiao Han cried in Yu's arms. She knew that no matter how hard she tried, she couldn't contend against Moon Shintian. The gap between their divine Tao was too great. Yu could only sigh. There was nothing she could do. Xiao Han had attracted too much attention after coming to the Chonghua divine realm. She had attracted the admiration of the geniuses of the 9 great divine clans. Even the Immortal King had changed the 99 layers of restrictions for her. However, as the master of the Chonghua realm, the Immortal King couldn't interfere with the internal affairs of the Moonflow clan. Xiao Han raised her teary face. She now understood Yu's helplessness when she had run away from the Moonflow clan. She had no control over her own fate. Unfortunately, Moon Shintian wouldn't give her a second chance to run away, especially when it came to Xiao Han. "Daughter, there's a solution to this. The only solution I can think of is my son-in-law. As long as he can come to the Chonghua divine realm and step into the upper 9 layers and accept the clan's test, this matter can be settled." However, Yu shook her head. Qin Hao's whereabouts were unknown, and his fate was unknown. How could he come to the Chonghua divine realm? The hope was too slim. "Brother Qin Hao," Xiao Han murmured Qin Hao's name. The longing in her heart was stronger than ever. Then, her teary eyes gradually dimmed. Even if Qin Hao came, what could he do? Although 1,000 years had passed, Qin Hao might still have a divine pulse. How could he step into the upper 9 layers? Xiao Han had stayed in the Chonghua divine realm for 1,000 years. She had a general understanding of the untainted land. Not to mention the upper 9 layers. More than 60% of the divine clans in the lower 90 layers were stronger than the Sword World. There were countless geniuses in the divine clans, and all of them were outstanding. Especially in the upper 9 layers, the members of the divine clans in each layer basically had perfect heavenly wheels. How could Qin Hao ascend to the supreme 9th layer of heaven? How could he break through the most powerful group of perfect heavenly wheels of the 9 clans? Difficult. Too difficult. It was not that Xiao Han did not believe in Qin Hao, but in the face of the cruel reality, illusory ideas were too weak. "Sister, little niece, good news, great news." Ouch! With a plop sound, Yuan, who had walked across countless divine realms and planes in the untainted land in a hurry, accidentally stepped on the stone steps. His palms fell to the ground, and his head smashed under his sister's feet. At the same time, his handsome face had an intimate kiss with Shi Tingyu. "Uncle." Xiao Han was surprised. She hurried 2 steps forward and helped you Yuan Jin up from the ground. How old are you? The genius of the Moon Flow clan, who is about to enter the ranks of the great gods, can't even walk steadily. You frowned. Try to cross the untainted land from the Yunzhe divine realm and return to the 97th layer of the Chonghua divine realm without stopping. Yuan Jin said angrily. He opened his mouth and shook his front teeth with his fingers. Feeling that they were not loose, he was relieved. If you have something to say, say quickly. We are annoyed. Get out of here as soon as you finish. You said with a straight face. Look at your face. Are you really my sister? You asked me to do something for you. I flew all the way back from the Yunzhe divine realm, and you didn't even give me a cup of tea. Yuan Jin felt wronged. Who could he reason with? Uncle, take a breath first. Xiaohan hurriedly brought a cup of tea from the stone table. Yuan Jin took it and drank it in one gulp. The fairy tea made of Chonghua immortal dew and several kinds of magic herbs flowed down his throat. His tired body was moisturized a little. He let out a long breath and gave Xiaohan a very good look. Then he straightened his gorgeous clothes and sat in the stone pavilion. He said, "You love me so much. It's not in vain that I worked so hard all the way." Who are you talking about? Believe it or not, I will slap you out. You glared at him. Don't, my sister. This time, I came back with news of my son-in-law. Yuan Jin's strength was much stronger than Yu's, but the shadow of his childhood was too great. He was born to be intimidated by his sister's aura. What should he do? Brother Qin Hao. Xiaohan trembled and quickly grasped his arm. How is he? He is alive, right? Uncle, tell me he is alive. Yu immediately became nervous. Alive, and well. That guy is really King awesome. Not only is he alive, but he also killed Junemo Temenaji, the second son of Holy King Yunze, was abolished because of him. Now the Tianzhao Divine Realm and the Yunze Divine Realm are in grief. Ha ha ha. Yuan Jin looked very elegant, but his mouth was full of vulgar words. However, in the stone pavilion, the mother and daughter no longer cared about his vulgar words. Their heads shook and they were stunned on the spot. Qin Hao was alive. Junimo was dead. Temenaji was abolished. This simple sentence brought a great shock to Xiaohan and Yu. They had thought of thousands of bad endings, but they never expected that it would be this one. Qin Hao escaped from the encirclement of the deity king's army. Now, they heard that he was still alive, but Junimo was dead. Junimo was the deity king's prince, the Tao spirit of Tianzhao deity king. He had the bloodline of an innate deity king, but he was killed by Qin Hao. Also, Yu Liuji, who was also the son of a divine king, had his cultivation crippled. Tens of thousands of years of hard work was destroyed in a day. This was really unfortunate. Little girl, did we think that Qin Hao was too weak? Yu took a long time to regain her senses. Her brother's words were definitely not a lie to make them happy. Yeah, it seems like I don't have to remarry anymore. Xiaohan stared blankly and murmured. Junimo was the perfect Tianluan with 30,000 years of celestial Tao and the bloodline of a deity king. Among all the perfect Tianluan in the Chaos era, Junmo's strength was one of the most outstanding. Xiaohan couldn't figure out how the overbearing Junimo, when she left the sword world, could be killed by the weak Qin Hao. For thousands of years, what happened to Qin Hao? Chapter 2260. Translator, Endless Fantasy Translation Editor, Endless Fantasy Translation Shura, Phone, Reincarnation Dojo. In a cultivation area, clusters of flames slowly floated, surrounding a certain figure. These fist-sized flames were sometimes hidden in the void, and sometimes they appeared. They looked very strange, as if they contained the characteristics of space. At this time, Qin Hao was meditating with his eyes closed. In the depths of his perfect Tao, the red lotus overlord fire was gradually ignited. Thin flame particles overflowed from the heavenly wheel and became denser. They meandered along the godly veins, and their color was turning dark red. In addition, in his second godly vein, there was an almost transparent white airflow that resonated with the outermost red godly vein. They seemed to be breathing at the same time, which was why the clusters of flames around his body were faintly discernible. In the past, condensing the red lotus godly power in the divine wilderness and controlling the space godly power in the academy took me close to 200 years. I didn't expect that it would only take me a month to cultivate them back. The red lotus Tao fire and the power of space flowing in his divine veins became more and more solid. It was as if he was holding them in his hand. The familiar feelings slowly returned. Qin Hao was happy, but he couldn't help but feel surprised. Being in the primordial Great Path reincarnation and with the help of a chaos godly weapon, the difference in the speed of condensing godly power was like heaven and earth. He guessed that it must have something to do with the earth. With a soft shout, Qin Hao opened his palms. Under the rotation of the wheel of light, the two godly veins flashed with extreme light. Dark red and white shone. Majestic, godly power flowed through his body. Then, he punched forward. Under his fist, a dark red shadow flew out. It was extremely fast and carried a domineering aura as it moved forward in the void. Suddenly, a flame exploded in front of him. The space trembled. Dense flame particles swept out and instantly turned into a blazing fire domain. The fire domain formed by this punch appeared and disappeared in Qin Hao's divine consciousness. It seemed illusory and ethereal, but it hid an extremely great danger. It's done. Qin Hao lowered his head and looked at his fist. His face was filled with surprise. The red lotus fire and space godly power merged perfectly. When he punched out, he didn't feel out of place. It was as if he had never lost these two godly powers. Moreover, the compatibility of Tao intent was better than before. The samsara Tao, right, and filth earth had indeed played a role that couldn't be underestimated in his ability to condense his divine energy. However, as his cultivation grew deeper and deeper, Qin Hao understood that his comprehension of Tao insights had far surpassed all those years ago. 1. At this moment, Qin Hao's heartstrings suddenly trembled. He discovered that his seventh divine vein, which had yet to fully form, was glowing brightly when the six divine energies erupted at the same time. In an instant, a numb and itchy feeling engulfed his entire body. This wasn't the first time Qin Hao had experienced this. He was very clear that this was a sign that his divine pulse had taken shape. In his ecstasy, Qin Hao exerted all his strength to release his 6 meridians. Under the intense stimulation, the flickering, illusory meridian in the inner layer of the celestial will finally condensed into the 7th meridian and the other 6 meridians. At this time, the power of the 6 great divine abilities surged like a raging river and poured into the 7th meridian. Ha ha ha! 70,000 years of cultivation. Qin Hao's silver hair fluttered in the wind. He raised his head and couldn't help but let out a burst of wild laughter. He did not expect that the recovery of his divine power would cause the formation of his 7th meridian. Was this also considered divine Tao Nirvana? When the Tao of emperors underwent nirvana, he still remembered what the Tao ancestor had said. The so-called nirvana did not necessarily mean comprehending life and death and experiencing the baptism of death. The Tao of nirvana was also nirvana. When you reached an absolute height and accidentally discovered that there was another vast world above your head, that was also nirvana. Could it be that the recovery of divine power is the same as the divinity's source? Destroying divine power and then cultivating again can give birth to cultivation? The question in Qin Hao's mind stopped him from laughing wildly. He fell into deep thought. After a while, he shook his head. It shouldn't be that simple. If destroying divine power and then cultivating again can give birth to divine meridians, then in the vast, untainted land of the gods, why didn't anyone try before? Or rather, someone had tried, but did not increase cultivation like Qin Hao. Strange. I have to ask my teacher about this. Suppressing the joy in his heart, he silently glanced at the light not far away. In the sacred light, a hazy and seductive figure was also meditating. Thinking of the hot-blooded scene of him and Vivian making love not long ago, Qin Hao could not bear it. However, he still knew how to distinguish between light and heavy. It was not appropriate to disturb Vivian's cultivation at this time. Taking a step in the void, Qin Hao turned into a shadow and escaped from the reincarnation ritual field. He stepped out of the light vortex door hanging high in the sky of the small town and then flew towards the dark and majestic Azura Divine Peak. At the same time, at the back mountain of the Azura Palace, in the forbidden area of the refining pool. Here, a person was suffering great pain, soaking in the viscous blood of dead souls, suffering the torture of life and death. Countless strange howls rang in Zhang Wu's ears, as if there were many dead souls flying around him. In the dark red refining pool, his body itched, as if he was being gnawed on by corpse worms. Too many scenes of life and death appeared in his mind. Under the cliff, the young Qin Hao ignored the claws of the ancient giant wolf and held him tightly. In the Tianjiao Divine Realm, he went through all kinds of obstacles and entered the prison. He saw Qin Hao's divine source on the verge of dissipating. He held the divine source that was riddled with holes and flew out of the immemorial realm in tears. In the Sunset Peak, in order to force Qin Hao to become a god, he had painstakingly planned for 600 years and had no choice but to fight against Qin Hao. There were too many scenes, almost all of which were related to Qin Hao. These scenes deeply tortured him. He felt that he was in the refining pool, as if he had fallen into the Azura hell. But because of this, seeing Qin Hao get injured again and again, Zhang Wu's heart was tied. He could soak in the most ferocious refining pool in the nether realm and endure until now. Cold sweat kept rolling down from his face. The fighting spirit particles around his body became thinner and thinner. His aura was also weakened in the dark red blood water. Zhang Lu clenched his fists tightly and watched Zhang Wu suffer in the viscous black water. He couldn't imagine that there was such a ferocious place in the world. The sunset war god he worshipped since childhood was also on the verge of collapse. Little Uncle said that he evolved a holy pulse here. Since he can do it, foster father must be able to do it too. Unknowingly, Zhang Lu's fingers had sunk into the flesh of his palms. He was afraid that Zhang Wu in the black water would disappear in front of him in the next second. His will is much stronger than you think. Don't worry, it's fine. Shura quietly came to the refining pool in the back mountain and appeared beside Zhang Lu Sr. Zhang Lu was stunned and immediately cupped his hands in greeting. Junior greets great god Shura. Shura, the divine prince of the ancient nether realm, the current divine lord of the slaughter world. His cultivation was infinitely close to the divine king. Who was the divine king? The supreme overlord of the untainted land. No need to be so polite. You are Ruo Chu's family, so I allowed you to use the only underworld pool in the nether realm, Shura said indifferently as he looked at Zhang Wu in the pool with admiration. He actually hated the people of the Archean realm. Whether it was Qinghua Mountain, the war god race, or the Tianjiao race, they were all the same in Shura's eyes. However, it had to be said that Qin Hao's close friend was indeed capable. He relied on his tenacious fighting spirit to resist the invasion of the Slaughter Dao will. One had to know that only the creatures of the nether realm could enter the underworld pool because it contained the Dao will of the nether realm. Only then could it alleviate the damage and pressure of the underworld pool. Even so, the conditions to enter the underworld pool were very strict. On Shura's peak, only the immortal realm and divine generals could enter. However, Zhang Wu was not a creature of the slaughter world, and his Dao was far from a divine general. Yet he could withstand the underworld pool's refinement. It could be seen that he was a talent. Master, Qin Hao followed Shura's aura and came directly to the mountain behind the shrine. When he saw Zhang Wu soaking in the refining pool, he couldn't help but be shocked. Don't be nervous. He's fine. Shura smiled at Qin Hao. War Tower glanced at Shura. This cold senior would only reveal a rare smile when facing Qin Hao. Why was he the same as Godfather in the past? Little Lu, Qin Hao asked War Tower, why are you here? Zhang Wu even entered the refining pool? Godfather heard from Uncle that he had entered the refining pool, so he begged Senior Shura to come in and give a try. In the end, War Tower nervously clenched his fists. Zhang Wu still hadn't come out, and his fighting spirit was getting weaker and weaker. It was really worrying. This brat. A hint of anger appeared on Qin Hao's face. He had cultivated the slaughter Dao before, so he entered the refining pool. Moreover, he was forced to do so. This place was too dangerous. How could Zhang Wu enter the refining pool? He's doing this because he wants to help you, Shura said. Azura said, apart from the reincarnation mirror, the underworld pool was the only place in the untainted land that could help increase one's cultivation. Zhang Wu did not want to be left behind by Qin Hao, so he tried his best. It's a bit risky, Qin Hao said seriously. He looked at Shura. If he can't hold on, please pull him out immediately. I will consider it, Shura said. Aren't you cultivating in the reincarnation dojo to gather your divine power? Why did you come out? Qin Hao had too many things to deal with. He couldn't stay in the reincarnation dojo like the sword cultivators of the sword world. He needed to give up his spot to other perfect wheels. Moreover, he had to study the Edo reincarnation and help Miuri carry out the perfect resurrection ceremony. Currently, every time he entered the reincarnation dojo, it was extremely precious to Qin Hao. He should cherish it. Here, look. Qin Hao released his will light. His 7 meridians flashed. Other than the 4 divine abilities of the underworld, the remaining 2 divine meridians were especially eye-catching. One was dark red like blood, and the other was bright white. They were the Red Lotus, Fire, Tyrant Fire, Divine Power, and the Spatial Divine Power. So fast, Shura was deeply shocked. When he noticed Qin Hao's 7th divine meridian, his facial features were obviously distorted. Teacher, you've noticed it too. My 7th divine meridian has been completely derived. It's right at the checkpoint of condensing 2 types of divine power. Qin Hao spoke out the question in his heart. Teacher, I feel that the 7th divine meridian is related to the gathering of 2 types of divine power. Do you think it's the same as the divine solution if I cripple my divine power and cultivate again? Shura naturally understood the meaning of the divine solution, but he shook his head. No, if you cripple your divine power and gather it again, you won't be able to derive the divine meridian. At most, it will allow you to deepen your understanding and control of divine power. Similar incidents had happened in the past in the Eldritch Land. They were either active or forced, but no matter who it was, they wouldn't be able to increase their cultivation because of it. Then why am I different from others? Qin Hao could feel that his gathering of divine power had indeed stimulated his heavenly wheels to a certain extent. This might be related to your Edo soil. Shura wasn't too sure about the reason, but this was the only thing he could think of. Edo soil was the strongest divine power in the underworld. It was a unique divine ability bestowed to the king of the underworld by primal chaos. The reason why the underworld could become a divine king's force was because of Edo soil. After all, it could reverse Dao from its roots, including the innate Dao. It could also gather great Dao from its roots. Qin Hao's divine power was reborn because of Edo soil. It was definitely not like an ordinary person who cultivated it again. So, in the entire Eldritch Land, I'm the only one who can benefit the divine meridian derived from heavenly wheels after I cripple my divine power and gather it again? Qin Hao asked. From the looks of it, that should be the case. Shura nodded. He wasn't sure where Qin Hao's evil power came from, or if others had it too, so he couldn't be sure that it was the only one. That's great. Should I cripple my divine power a few more times and cultivate again? This way, it'll be easier to cross the 100,000-year cultivation barrier. Qin Hao was excited. As his cultivation increased, the effect of the primordial samsara power in the samsara field was gradually decreasing. Furthermore, the time spent was also increasing. If he wanted to derive the 8th divine meridian, it would definitely not be completed in a few months or hundreds of years. Qin Hao predicted that it would take at least 2,000 years. In the eyes of many great gods, deriving a divine meridian in 2,000 years was already a miracle. However, it was different for Qin Hao because he was facing the threat of being hunted down by the deity king. Only by crossing the 100,000-year cultivation barrier would he be qualified to come into contact with the so-called primordial Tao of the great gods. Only by stepping into this level would he be able to barely fight with the deity king. If you want to completely cripple yourself, you can give it a try. The smile on Shura's face gradually froze. Cripple and gather again, and then cripple. Just play. If things went wrong, Qin Hao might end up like the spirit in the dungeon, exploding and dying. After all, whether or not his filthy earth was real had yet to be verified. There are risks in being optimistic. Qin Hao felt a sense of danger from Shura's aura. It was better not to try it so easily in the future. Luck wouldn't always be with him. Reincarnation Deity Realm, 97th layer of reincarnation, Eugene Yuan of the Yuelu clan, is here to visit great god Shura of the Slaughter Universe. At this moment, a shout came from outside the eldritch land through the way of heaven and resounded in the sky above Shura phone. Chapter 2261. Translator. Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation outside the Slaughter Divine Realm's way of heaven. A tall, deer-riding horse stopped in the vast universe, stepping on the moonlight. It was white all over, exuding a sense of a holy beast. There was a young man sitting at the side of it. This young man was handsome and extraordinary, and his bearing was extraordinary. Yu Yuanjin glanced at the oppressive environment of the ancient underworld to make sure that he didn't go the wrong way as he did before. Then he stared at the dark and endless void in front of him. Through his divine thought, Yu Yuanjin sensed that there were many creatures in it. It is said that the four realms of the ancient underworld don't welcome the heavenly wheels of other divine realms. I should be polite enough to wait here. Yu Yuanjin took out a tray of steamed dumplings wrapped in thick paper from his bosom. The storage ring on his finger flashed, and he immediately took out a pot of wine. He ate the steamed dumplings in one bite, and then drank a mouthful of wine, savoring the taste. Unexpectedly, a beam of death will suddenly penetrated the dark and endless void. It condensed into a scythe of the Grim Reaper and slashed toward him fiercely. Yu Yuanjin stopped chewing and frowned. The white deer under him seemed to be alert. The attack was particularly strong. It twisted its hooves uneasily and faintly wanted to retreat. Yu Yuanjin opened his mouth and spat out the meat buns in his mouth mixed with the smell of wine. They folded into a bright moonlight light shield, immediately protecting him and the deer-riding horse. Then the blade light slashed down. The cold black blade light cut through everything and smashed the moonlight light shield fiercely. Yu Yuanjin and the white deer were suddenly shocked, and both of them were knocked out. The hot steam bun in his hand was thrown to the ground. Before he had time to feel sorry for it, it turned into nothingness in the blade light. Fortunately, Yu Yuanjin had a deep foundation in the divine path. He was quick-witted and held the white deer's neck tightly, so he didn't roll down on the spot. Even so, he felt his blood boil and his heavenly wheels faintly tearing. F***CK, I just shouted. I didn't break into the Slaughter Divine Realm. Lord Azura, you don't have to be so ruthless. Yu Yuanjin complained and rushed from the 97th layer of reincarnation to the Slaughter Divine Realm across countless planes. He was kind enough to send a message, but before he saw the person, he was slashed first. There was no doubt that this slash was from Azura. Yu Yuanjin was confident that there was no other heavenly wheels in the divine realm that could make him so embarrassed. He was very unhappy, but this slash made him understand that even if he was about to enter the ranks of the great gods, he was no different from a flea in front of the Shura. At most, he could only jump a few more times. Forget it. If it weren't for the fact that he couldn't win, he wouldn't be able to bear the blood feud of destroying the buns and spilling the wine. Translation, people of Yu Yuanjin of Reincarnation Realm. Yu Yuanjin. Translation. A domineering question came. The dark and deep world lights surged, and a group of cultivators broke out of the light. As soon as they met, they suppressed Yu Yuanjin, who was riding alone. Gullah gullah gulp. Yu Yuan Jin swallowed his saliva silently. He glanced at Azura, Netherworld, Gui D, and Godlord Umo, then looked at the four realms god generals behind the four godlords. It was only a few steam buns that had been destroyed. Perhaps it was a momentary slip of the hand, so it couldn't be considered a blood feud. Cough, cough. I am Yu Yuan Jin, the son of the great elder of the Moonflow clan at the 97th level of the Chonhua realm. Today, I have come to visit the massacre world to deliver a message to someone. Yu Yuan Jin turned over and got off the deer. Facing the tens of thousands of divine troops in front of him, his attitude improved a lot. The underworld has no dealings with the multiple splendor immortal king, and I, Azura, have no relationship with the moon divine sky. Visit? Azura's pitch black eyes darkened slightly. Can't you come up with a good excuse? Brat, you've reached the great success stage of the divine will and already have the embryonic form of a great god. This level of cultivation must not have been easy to come by. Godlord Yellow Springs said with a heavy expression, his enormous skeletal body exerting a suffocating pressure. Kiki, you devil master, who was wearing a black robe, habitually let out an eerie laugh. Everyone, I haven't done anything evil. Are you threatening me? Yu Yuan Jin immediately felt that something was amiss. His gaze swept back and forth, and he finally discovered Qin Hao behind Azura. He hurriedly pointed at Qin Hao and shouted, "Hey, brat, I helped you before." When the sword world was surrounded, Jun Mo released the Heavenly Edict Seal to suppress the seamless divine domain. It was I who secretly used a divine artifact to help you break the Heavenly Edict Divine King Seal. I helped you before, and Xiao Han is my niece. In other words, you are my niece's son-in-law. Uncle? Qin Hao's gaze was cold. I can't match up to you. How could he know if this so-called uncle was real or fake? Thinking back, when Jun Mo attacked the seamless divine domain, there was indeed an expert who had broken the Heavenly Edict Seal. However, the situation was too chaotic at the time, and many divine king forces were present. Who could be sure that it was Yu Yuan Jin who had done it? After all, as his grandfather, the tyrannical great elder Yu Shintian, not only did he not recognize him as his grandson-in-law, but also forcibly abducted Xiao Han. Yu Shintian saw Xiao Han die and did nothing to save her. If he had even slightly helped back then, even if it was directed at Jun Mo, Qin Hao and the sword world wouldn't have been so miserable. But now, he remembered this son-in-law of his. Match up? Qin Hao really couldn't match up to him. The heavens can be my witness. Everything I said is true. I, Yu Yuan Jin, have never done anything grand or heroic in my life, but I've never done anything that offends the heavens or reason. Big brother, second brother, third brother, I'll leave this brat to you. Try to be gentle. With that, Azura turned to return to Azura phone. The Yulu clan was nothing to be afraid of, but Zhonghua, immortal king, had to give them some face. Breaking his arms and legs was enough. Also, seal that mouth of his. It's too noisy. Azura turned around and added, I'm good at separating flesh and blood. Gui D stepped out. Qin Hao, I'm really your uncle. Look at this, you know this. Little Han is in trouble. Now, except for you, no one can help her. She's about to get married. Yu Yuan Jin's scalp tingled as he looked at the mountain of corpses gradually floating on Gui D's back. He shouted anxiously. Although his cultivation was close to that of a great god, he was not yet a great god. He was definitely not Gui D's opponent. Moreover, he had no reason to fight with Gui D. Whoosh! A sparkling and shiny ornament was thrown out like a hidden weapon, turning into a beam of light and falling toward Qin Hao. Azura's eyes were slightly cold. He paused, and the godly power of slaughter in his palm shook. He waved his hand, ready to annihilate it. Teacher, wait, Qin Hao hurriedly said. His figure shuttled out and caught the ornament thrown by Yu Yuan Jin. Holding the shining crescent moon pendant, an indescribable emotion surged from his heart. This was Xiao Han's personal ornament, and it had always been inseparable. Looking up, Qin Hao looked at the panic-stricken Yulu clan youth. His eyes were slightly complicated. At this moment, he believed the identity of the other party's uncle. I'm here to deliver a letter. The Taoist of Qinghua Mountain can't be trusted, and the people of the slaughter world can't be trusted. Yu Yuanjin sobbed. Second Master, don't touch him. Qin Hao came to Gui Di's side and stopped him from attacking. Gui Di looked at Qin Hao with doubts, and then dispersed the ghost curse heavenly wheel. Whether you are my uncle or not remains to be verified, but this jade pendant is indeed Han Er's. How is she in Yu Lu clan? Married? Who is she going to marry? Qin Hao asked. Yu Yuanjin looked around and smiled helplessly. Are you going to talk to me here? He understood Qin Hao's situation. There was a godly king's butcher's knife hanging over Qin Hao's head at all times. Even though godly kings couldn't enter the ancient underworld, other heavenly wheels couldn't use their godly power to eavesdrop. Take it back to Azura Peak, said Azura. Let's go. Come play with us in the slaughter world. You look good, and your body is quite strong. God Lord Umo smiled strangely and came to Yu Yuanjin's side. Wanted to touch him. What are you doing? Yu Yuanjin hurriedly dodged. You'd better follow me. Otherwise, even if you were Xiao Han's uncle, I'm afraid I can't protect you in the slaughter world, said Qin Hao. Yu Yuanjin ran over and nodded repeatedly. Don't worry. I'm very honest. Woo-woo. Seeing that its master had abandoned it, the moonlight deer hid in the distance and whined. Why are you making so much noise? Yu Yuanjin turned around and glared at it. If you make any more noise, I'll seal your mouth. Stay here obediently. If you enter the slaughter world, even if you are my mount, I can't protect you. The moonlight god deer spat out a mouthful of saliva at him. Then its body flashed and it disappeared into thin air. Seeing this, everyone was speechless. Azura Peak, Azura Conference Hall. The four godly masters of the underworld sat side by side. Many godly generals filled the hall and the corridor. That's right. It was this senior who attacked. I recognize him. Li Guangxing pointed at Yu Yuanjin, who stood alone in the center of the hall, trembling. After Qin Hao left the sword world, the immortals of Qinghua Mountain and Yu Yuanjin didn't leave with the other forces. Coincidentally, he was recognized by Wuk at that time. The immortals of Qinghua Mountain also recognized Yu Yuanjin's voice when he mocked Jun Mo. At that time, Lucio was exhausted and unconscious, but Li Guangxing could testify. Qin Hao is indebted to you, uncle. I can't repay your kindness. Please forgive me for offending you just now. Qin Hao bowed to Yu Yuanjin. Voila! In the hall, 50 sword cultivators cupped their hands and thanked Yu Yuanjin at the same time. Sword cultivators would never forget those who helped the sword world. Besides, in that situation, only Yu Yuanjin dared to stand up and blame Junimo. Don't worry, don't worry. It's a small matter. Helping you is helping Honor. In my eyes, both of you are my flesh and blood. Seeing you get beaten up made my heart ache, Yu Yuanjin said with a smile, secretly glancing at the four Azuras sitting side by side. Don't forgive? If he didn't forgive, his mouth would be sealed by Gui Di. Uncle, what's wrong with Xiao Han? Qin Hao asked worriedly. Beside him, Vivian was also anxious. Xiao Han was Qin Hao's legal wife. She was carried in a palanquin with 8 people. The emperors of the 4 regions of the divine wilderness had witnessed the unprecedented wedding. Speaking of which, Vivian was the concubine. But now, Xiao Han was actually getting married. From Yu Yuanjin's tone, it was obviously not to Qin Hao. After all, with Yu Xintian's style, it was absolutely impossible for them to recognize Qin Hao as their grandson-in-law. Alas, my poor niece. Yu Yuanjin's face was full of grief. After squeezing out 2 pitiful tears for a long time, he slowly said to everyone, Chapter 2262. After Xiao Han returned to the Moonflow Divine Clan, she stood out too much in the past 1,000 years. She entered Nirvana with the Emperor Dao, attracted the divine tribulation, and created the perfect heavenly wheel bloodline. As the direct descendant of the great elder, Moon Xintian, the entire clan thought this was how it should be. However, What happened next exceeded the expectations of the various elders in the clan, and also alarmed the entire upper 9 heavens of the divine clan. Xiao Han stepped into the Chonghua gate and knelt before the master of the 99 heavens, immortal King Chonghua, to summon the divine King Tribulation. That day, the upper 9 heavens were all shocked. The divine King Tribulation was a life and death tribulation, and it was not something an ordinary heavenly wheel could withstand. Throughout history, there were 9 perfect geniuses in the upper 9 heavens who sought the immortal King Tribulation, but they all died in the tribulation. But Xiao Han succeeded. Since the beginning of the chaos, she was the only one in the entire Chonghua divine realm who could understand the great Tao of life and death and create the perfect heavenly wheel bloodline. If the first time was a fluke, the second time was even more shocking. After 300 years, she sought the second tribulation. After this tribulation, the divine masters of the upper 9 heavens were all shocked, and immortal King Chonghua was also impressed. He pardoned Xiao Han for ignoring the 99 heavens and allowed her to enter the Chonghua gate freely and seek the Tao from the immortal king anytime. Even the divine masters of the upper 9 heavens did not have such glory. For a time, Xiao Han's name was like a divine radiance descending from the heavens, striking down from the 9 heavenly layers and reaching every heavenly Tao in the lower 90 heavenly layers. She became the idol of thousands of young girls of the god race, and also the goddess that billions of young geniuses of the god race could only dream of. In the upper 9 heavens, even the strongest youths of the 9 clans admired Xiao Han. My niece is really too outstanding, too dazzling. Her talent is slightly inferior to mine, but it's still very impressive. Yu Yuanjin praised without hiding his admiration. He also knew that Xiao Han worked so hard for Qin Hao. Unfortunately, her husband, who had not received any news from her, did not know about this, and, as her grandfather, he had already stopped Feng Kai. When Yu Shintian saw how amazing Xiao Han was, his face was filled with glory, and no matter where he went, he held his head high. Although he was arrogant in the past, he still knew how to restrain himself somewhat in the upper 9 heavens. But now, even when facing the supreme divine master of the 9 divine clans, he still held his head high and began to look down on others with his nostrils. This was something that would never happen in the past. When they heard this, Li Guangxing, Lu Qiu, and Long Miao looked at each other in dismay. Mothers rose in status because of their children, and, as elders, they were always like this when they saw their children and grandchildren present. However, it was rare to see a place as arrogant as the moon god sky. This is where the shamelessness lies. Yu Yuanjin spread out his hands in front of the crowd. That shameless father of his had raised a law of battle within the clan, calling upon all the upper 9 heavens divine clans to participate. He even specially stipulated that only the descendants of the various clans were allowed to participate. The evil in his heart was as clear as day. Just as Yu Yuanjin was sending out the message, the law of battle had already begun. The upper 9 heavens divine clans had placed great importance on it. Even though Moon Shintian did not explicitly state the purpose of the law of battle, the divine masters of the various races all had an answer in their hearts. Son-in-law selection. This law of battle was specifically to select a son-in-law for Xiao Han. Otherwise, why would the moon god sky stipulate that only the descendants of the 9 divine clans were allowed to participate? Wouldn't it be spectacular if the divine generals, elders, or even the 9 great divine masters of the various clans fought? Wouldn't he be spectacular? Wouldn't he be more attractive? The stubborn intentions of the moon god sky's elders were already very clear. This is simply absurd. Wei Wei's face flushed with anger, her chest heaving up and down. Qin Hao was Xiao Han's legitimate husband, and they already had a daughter. It was one thing for grandfather to refuse to recognize a son-in-law, but he actually wanted to find another one. This was clearly a humiliation to Qin Hao. This is truly absurd. Gue Di and Divine Master Yellow Springs exchanged glances. I've long heard that the Moon Flow clan has a man who thinks of himself as noble and virtuous, but is actually arrogant. I didn't expect that the Moonflow clan's great elder, who worshipped strength and only associates with the strong, would be so lacking in the manners of an elder. Divine Master, Yu Mo mocked and ridiculed. Yu Yuanjin nodded repeatedly, expressing his agreement. He then walked over to Qin Hao, grabbed his arms, and cried, "Niece-in-law, we can only rely on you now. If you don't go, little Han will be beyond help. She can only be controlled by that old man." The Moonflow clan had two divine masters, and the Patriarch and Great Elder had both reached the primordial realm. Their statuses were equal, and everything Moon Shintian did represented the will of the Moonflow clan. No one dared to disobey him. The immortal king was the Lord of Heavy Flower, but he never interfered with the internal affairs of the 9 divine clans. The patriarchs of the other divine clans naturally could not interfere. Firstly, there was no reason, and secondly, they could not beat Moon Shintian. Sitting firmly on the 97th level, Moon Godsky's arrogance was not a facade. His cultivation was truly powerful. Phew! Qin Hao exhaled heavily from his chest. He frowned and lowered his head slightly. Indeed, no one could go against Moon Shintian's will. Only by going there himself would he have a chance to drag Xiao Han out of Moon Shintian's trap. But it was difficult. What do you think? Azura asked Qin Hao. Once you leave the ancient underworld, you will be in extreme danger. The heavenly decree will come to capture you at any time. Going to the Heavy Flower Divine Realm to see Xiao Han was difficult. He would have to fight his way from the lower world's 90th level to the upper world's 9th level. Moreover, if Qin Hao did not show his strength, how could he take Xiao Han away? First, he had to gain the approval of Moon Shintian and the Moonflow clan. Then, this law battle would be Qin Hao's stage to prove himself. Perhaps it would not be too difficult to break through the lower world's 90th level, but Qin Hao wanted to defeat the perfect prodigy of the 9 clans in the law battle. Moreover, the moment he walked out of the slaughter world, a divine king's butcher's knife could come down on his head at any time. When he left, his life would be hanging by a thread. It was very likely that he would not be able to return. The hall fell silent. Azura, Nether, Guadi, and Umo, the 4 divine lords, were very clear about Qin Hao's situation. Lucio, Li Guangxing, and the others also understood. If Qin Hao decided to go to the Heavy Flower Divine Realm, whether he could pull Xiao Han out of his predicament was still unknown. However, he would definitely put himself in danger. Yu Yuanjin looked at Qin Hao, who lowered his head and did not speak. He laughed bitterly and said, "Actually, I understand your difficulties. If you are rational and do not save Han, from an outsider's point of view, I can understand very well. However, as Xiao Han's uncle, I still look down on you from the bottom of my heart." Qin Hao did not deserve to be a man if he did not see his wife when she was trapped and let others control her fate. He did not even care about chastity. You decide. No matter whether you go or not, the 4 realms of the underworld will fully support you. Azura said to Qin Hao, his eyes as firm as ever. If Qin Hao went, he would accompany him, in case Tian Zhao tried to kill him. Nether and the other 2 nodded at the same time. Their attitude was the same as Azura's. Since they had taken Qin Hao as their disciple and taught him the divine power of the underworld, they would carry the burden of their disciple on their shoulders. Although they were skeletons, ghosts, and rotten ghosts hated by the world, they were also human. Although I don't want you to go, you have to go because that is Xiao Han, Bao-Er's mother. Vivian held Qin Hao's hands tightly. If Qin Hao did not go, no one would blame him. After all, Qin Hao could not even protect himself. However, Vivian would feel sad and sad. If she was the one trapped in a Moonflow clan, how sad would she be if she knew that Qin Hao did not come? Supreme One, we are willing to follow you in life and death. Voila! Zhang Lang, Qing Cheng, Yu Feng, and Xian Yu stepped out at the same time. Chu San, we are leaving the Sword World this time to follow you to the end, Lucio said. After that, the 50 swordsmen of the Sword World stepped out in an orderly manner. Kid, from the first time I saw you, I have always thought highly of you. Be bold and do it. The brothers of the Azura Peak will support you, Emotutu said. The eyes of many god generals in the Azura Palace shone with black light. They all took the initiative to grab their weapons. Everyone. Qin Hao raised his head and smiled at Vivian. He reached out and brushed the hair in front of her forehead. Then, he faced the people in the meeting hall. Xiao Han is my first wife. She gave birth to a cute daughter for me. When we got married, many elders witnessed our marriage. We swore that we would not abandon each other in life and death. If I let her be trapped by the elders without doing anything, I am not worthy to be her husband, and I am not worthy to be the child's father. So, I am sorry to all of you. Qin Haoyan had already made his stance clear to everyone. He had to go to the reincarnation god realm. However, if he went, he might implicate many people. Now, every step he took, every decision he made, affected the life and death of too many people. Reuniting his family would implicate the 5 god realms. That would cause many families to be separated. This was not what Qin Hao wanted. All right, since you have made your decision, I will go with you. Shura stood up. We will go too. God Lord Netherworld knew that last time Shura had followed Qin Hao, he had almost been killed by deity King Tianzhao. This time, the 4 brothers had to be united. They would go together and return together. If they did not return, the 4 brothers would not return. Us too, Zhang Lang and the others hurriedly said. The sword cultivators of the sword realm will go together, Lu Qiu said. This. Yu Yuanjin looked at everything in the hall in shock. He did not expect Qin Hao to be so important to them. They knew they would be killed by the deity king. Did they not want to live anymore? All right, the 5 god realms will go and challenge the 99 reincarnation god realm. Qin Hao held Vivian's hand tightly. His blood was boiling, and a heroic spirit rose spontaneously. No. Seeing this, Yu Yuanjin shook his head at the crowd. He is going to pick up his wife, not to start a realm war. Forgive me for saying this, but if you encourage him like this, not to mention picking up his wife, he will probably be kicked out by immortal King Zhonghua. He might even ignite the 99 god realms to fight. Qin Hao looked at the furious crowd in the hall. They were all like barrels of gunpowder. If he went with the army, it would be like what Yu Yuanjin said. They might even start a war. What do you think we should do? Shura Dao. Qin Hao shouldered the hope of the underworld's revival. It was related to whether Ing Sha could be reborn or not. I feel that we shouldn't bring too many people. Just bring a few people with you. Furthermore, it would be best if Lord Azura and the other 3 didn't go. Everyone should know about my father's temper. If this brat brings all of you there, he might think that we are trying to intimidate him. At that time, it would be even more difficult to deal with him. Yu Yuanjin understood Moon Xintian very well. Shura's eyes suddenly narrowed. When he looked at Yu Yuanjin, a sharp glint shot out from his eyes. He didn't want the 4 of them to go. What if Qin Hao encountered immortal King Tianzhao? Was he trying to harm him? Teacher, I think Uncle is right. The fewer people there, the better. Otherwise, we'll attract the hostility of the 99 layers of heavy flour. Secondly, if there are too many people, it'll be easier for the divine will of the heavenly edict divine king, Qin Hao said. Are you sure you want to go alone? Shura said solemnly. If there was danger, he couldn't save them. Bringing 8 perfect heaven wheels is enough, Qin Hao said with relief. Zhan Wu, Vivian, and the other 8 perfect heaven wheels from Divine Wasteland, including himself, it was enough to break through the 99 heaven wheels. Bold. Yu Yuanjin gave Qin Hao a thumbs up. Then he was stunned. Did he hear wrong? 8 perfect heaven wheels? Where are you going? Do I have a part in it? Outside the palace, a burly figure clad in armor stepped in. It was Zhan Wu, clad in godly king armor. Dazzling fighting wool particles flowed on the armor, and a perfect halo enveloped his body. At the edge of the halo, 5 pure godly veins of fighting wool flashed. On both sides, the battle tower and celestial dipper were synchronized, and the divine will they exuded was perfect. Oh my God! Yu Yuanjin turned his head and took a look. He took a deep breath. If he hadn't been born in the divine realm of heavy glory and was used to seeing the perfect celestial wheel of the upper 9th heaven, he would have fainted from fright because of these 3. Chapter 2263. Translator, Endless Fantasy Translation Editor, Endless Fantasy Translation Translator, Endless Fantasy Translation Editor, Endless Fantasy Translation Divine Realm. At the peak of the towering peak, a wave of brilliant radiance flowed down like a wave of the primordial light. Layers of ripples surrounded the entire peak of the 99 heavens, forming a natural barrier. At this moment, the 98 heavens. This heavens was called the heavens of multiple heavens. It was the land of the immortal kings and was ruled by the descendants of the heavens of multiple heavens. In the Chonghua sky, bejeweled pavilions stood in great numbers, and cranes soared high into the clouds. Waves of divine light flickered within the pavilions, and there was an unknown soothing tune being played from somewhere. The celestial music lingered in the air, and when one was in the midst of it, it was as if one was swimming freely in a fairyland, dreamy and illusory. Young Lord Palace. Young Lord Qing. His name was Zhong Qing. He was the master of the 98 heavens, the son of the immortal king and the grandson of the immortal king. Zhong Qing's status in the heavens of multiple heavens was extremely high. His status was on par with the son of the Tao spirit of the deity kings. His Tianlun was perfect. His Tao was in 7 meridians. The blood of the heavens of multiple heavens flowed in his veins, and he also inherited the Tao of the innate deity king. Since Zhong Qing was born, he stood at the top of the primitive barren celestial Tao. He enjoyed the supreme glory and talent and looked down on the people of the deity world. Not only did the Tianlun have to look up to him, but to the ants of the mortal world, Zhong Qing was an unimaginable existence. Inside the crown prince's palace, there was a song of elegance, like the sound of high mountains and flowing rivers, beginning at the peak, trickling into the wilderness. Hearing this song, one would have the feeling of being at the top of the mountain, looking down on all the smaller mountains. There was also the sound of trickling streams, sprinkling over the wide expanse. It was surging and lingering. Good melody. A voice of praise sounded from the bottom of his heart. Within the hall, a peerlessly beautiful man in a snow-white robe and a silver crown moved his gaze away from the bamboo slip in his hand to look at the young man who sat upright while playing the zither and said, "Listening to your song is better than cultivating 10 ancient scrolls. Even this exquisite, immortal scripture in my hand has been resolved along with your song." However, the youth opposite him had his fingers on strings. He raised his head and smiled. This person had white hair, white eyebrows, and a half-moon mark flashed on his forehead. Although he wore a solemn black robe, it still couldn't hide the Saint Chi of the great path that filled his body. Yu Shangqing, the 97th level of Chonghua, the eldest son of the Moonflow clan, the eldest son of the Moonflow clan's divine lord. His heavenly wheel was perfect, and his divine meridians were 9-patterned. Apart from the great Tao divine power of the Moonflow clan, he also specialized in the great Tao of the Guqin. He was an elegant person. As for Yu Shangqing and Yu Yuanjin, they were hailed as the 2 prides of the Yu clan by the Shang 9 clans. This was naturally the opinion of the 9 clans. However, Yu Shangqing felt ashamed in his heart. Compared to Yu Yuanjin, his divine path was actually much weaker. Yu Yuanjin had crossed the 100,000-year threshold and stepped into the realm of great deities. He had received the Hongming will and had the embryonic form of a great deity. However, Yu Shangqing, was still trapped in the threshold and only had 9 meridians. At this moment, hearing the praise of the deity king's grandson, Yu Shangqing smiled and said, "Young master, don't talk nonsense. The heavens of multiple heavens, immortal scripture, was written by the deity king. It contains the upper, middle, and lower parts. Not only does the upper part of the scripture contain the beginning of Tao, but also the middle part of the scripture contains the Hongmeng will. Just the lower part of the scripture is not something that can be fused with my crude zither skills. I'm ashamed. I'm just joking. Look at how serious you are." Zhongqing put down the ancient scroll in his hand and sighed softly. Just as the eldest son of the Moonflow clan said, The heavens of multiple heavens, immortal scripture, was indeed difficult to understand. Perhaps it had something to do with the level. Speaking of which, you should really ask Yuan Jin for advice. He used the middle part of the scripture to break through the divine path. Now, he can be said to be the number one person among the 9 clans in the divine realm of multiple heavens, Yu Shanqing said seriously. That brother is hard to come by in 1,000 years. He comes and goes in a hurry. Ask him, forget it. Zhongqing's face was full of helplessness. In truth, he couldn't understand. Yu Yuanjin was a glutton who viewed food as his life and spent all his time idling around. How could he have seen through the middle part of the immortal scripture and broken through the divine path and become a great divinity? Using the words of the old ancestor at the peak to evaluate him, this was likely the enlightenment of taking food as the Tao and being free and unfettered. Others racked their brains and struggled bitterly to obtain this strength. But when Yuanjin ate meat buns, all of his strength was swallowed into his stomach. Empyrean Divine has rebuilt the Law Battle platform on the 97th day and has invited the juniors of the 9 clans to participate. Right now, my clan is in full swing preparing for this. What does the young monarch think of this? Yu Shanqing asked. This matter had already spread far and wide, and the juniors of the 9 clans were eager to give it a try. It should be for that Xiaohan girl, Zhongqing lightly said. He picked up the bamboo scroll and began to earnestly read through it. Does the young monarch not care about this at all? Yu Shanqing was surprised. To be more accurate, although Xiaohan wasn't a member of the Moonflow clan, half of the clan's blood flowed through her veins. She was the granddaughter of Great Elder Empyrean Divine. The key point was that Xiaohan had asked the immortal king to send down tribulation and had forcefully withstood 2 of them. In the heavy glory divine realm, she was the only one. The immortal king's evaluation of Xiaohan was extremely high. He believed that she had a high chance of stepping into Grand Mist in the future and becoming a great divinity. Moreover, she was an extremely extreme existence. When the immortal king spoke of extreme, it was clear that he was referring to the quasi-god king level. This was similar to the current 2 great pillars of the Moonflow clan and God Lord Zhongqing's boundary. Looking at the young monarch's attitude, he seemed indifferent towards this. Could it be that he didn't have any thoughts at all? It had to be known that according to the immortal king's evaluation, Xiaohan's future potential had already surpassed that of Yu Shanqing and Zhongqing. What are you talking about? A clear voice sounded out from outside the hall. Then a figure stepped in. This person wore a noble purple robe, and immortal light flowed around his body. At this time, the pressure of a great divinity gushed out. Yu Shanqing hurriedly stood up and bowed towards the newcomer. Shanqing greets God Lord Zhongqing. Honorable nephew, we aren't outside, so there is no need to be so polite. God Lord Zhongqing brightly laughed. Of the juniors of the upper 9 clans, only Yu Shanqing was closest to Zhongqing. He was naturally happy and treated Yu Shanqing with great affection. Uncle, I was just talking to the young monarch about Empyrean Divine's Tao battle of the 9 clans. Yu Shanqing straightened his posture and smiled. Oh, what do you think? God Lord Zhongqing asked. This matter could be considered a rare event in the last 10,000 years of the 9 clans. My father has ordered that little brother, Shanqing, will participate in this Tao battle. Yu Shanqing frankly said. He had cultivated for 90,000 years and was about to attack the great threshold of Grand Mist, so it was not appropriate for him to participate. After all, in this Tao battle, the 9 clans would send out juniors with extremely low cultivations. Yu Shanqing's youngest son has a 6-vein divine bloodline. If he participates in this battle, he will be invincible amongst the upper 9 god clans. God Lord Zhongqing smiled and nodded. As a god lord of the 98 god clans, he naturally understood the situation of the juniors of the 9 clans. As he spoke, God Lord Zhongqing silently glanced at his son. Putting aside Yu Yuanjin and Yu Shanqing, if there was anyone in the 9 clans that could suppress God Lord Yu Shanqing's youngest son, it would be Zhongqing, who had a 7-vein divine bloodline. God Lord Zhongqing was well aware of the intentions behind this Tao battle. Yu Yuanjin was Xiao Han's uncle, so it was impossible for him to participate. As for Yu Shangqing, although he was a junior, he was still stronger than many of the elders of the 9 clans. It was impossible for him to rely on his cultivation to suppress others. Thus, the crux of this Dao battle rested on Mochizuki and his son Zhongqing. Both were direct descendants of the great god clans and had perfect heavenly wheels of the great Dao. As for Zhongqing, his cultivation was 10,000 years higher than that of Mochizuki's. This was a slight advantage. I'm a little tired. Shangqing, let's meet again another day. Zhongqing solemnly placed the ancient slip into the divine box and then took it to his room. Okay. Yu Shangqing waved his sleeve, putting away the divine zither into his storage ring. After silently glancing at God, Lord Zhongqing, he respectfully withdrew from the hall. Did the 98th young lord really not care? If this really was the case, then it would truly be a good thing for his little brother, Mochizuki. Zhongqing, Zhongqing, you really don't plan on participating in this Dao battle? Or perhaps you don't have any feelings for Xiao Han? As Yu Shangqing left, God Lord Zhongqing hurriedly chased after Zhongqing. The two of them entered the room, where he saw his son lying on a bed with his hands behind his head. Then what is father's intention? Zhongqing asked. Xiao Han is Yuanjin's niece. If I participate, won't the seniority be thrown into disarray? God Lord Zhongqing smiled upon hearing this. He felt that there was a chance. It seems that you do have some feelings for Xiao Han. Son, I really don't. Zhongqing sat up and solemnly said, Lady Xiao Han's bloodline talent is truly extraordinary. Even among the upper 9 races, she is considered one of the best. How could the old ancestors' judgment be wrong? After all, Xiao Han was someone that immortal King Zhonghua approved of. Even as the grandson of an immortal king, Zhongqing did not receive such treatment. But son, to be honest, I admire her, not love. Father, I'm sure you know that Lady Xiao Han is already married. She already has a husband, so how can I marry her? If word of this gets out, won't my Zhonghua celestial race become the laughingstock of the deity kings? In the deity Dao, seniority was negligible, and it was not strange for a master and disciple to love each other. If Zhongqing were to marry Yuanjin's niece, the marriage of 2 innate celestial races would be a beautiful story. However, Xiao Han was already married. If Zhongqing were to marry someone else's wife, would he not care about his face? Did the Zhonghua celestial race not care about their face? If he married someone else, the entire race would be tainted, and Zhongqing would become a despicable man who stole someone else's wife. Son, you also know that Tianluan is a god because he has escaped from the mortal world. In the eyes of the deity Dao, the common sense of the mortal world is not that strong. Although Xiao Han is married, the person who married her is a nobody who is not worthy of her. Otherwise, why would that stubborn old man Yueshan Sky go all the way to Sword World to bring his granddaughter back? His intention is to cut off the connection between Xiao Han and that brat. God Lord Zhonghua had heard of this matter and knew about Qin Hao. Sword World had destroyed a world, and Qin Hao's life was unknown. Perhaps he was already dead. Then, what was wrong with Zhongqing marrying Xiao Han? Father, Zhongqing said coldly. Zhonghua waved his hand and interrupted. Xiao Han's talent is rare in the Great Desolate Era. Her appearance, talent, personality, and even her identity, there are only a few like her in the God world. Ask yourself, how many girls like her can you meet? Zhongqing was silent. He could not help but think of Xiao Han's appearance and figure. Indeed, she was impeccable. If she had not married before, regardless of appearance, talent, personality, or even identity, she would be a perfect match for Zhongqing. Zhongqing especially admired Xiao Han's personality and character. To be able to withstand the innate deity king tribulation of the peak's grand ancestor, even Zhongqing felt ashamed of his own inferiority. You want me to participate in the Dao battle of the 9 races? Zhongqing looked up and asked. Zhonghua nodded. Once the grand ancestor took a fancy to someone, there would be no more chances. Is this your personal wish, or the will of the Zhonghua race? Zhongqing asked. The will of a Zhonghua race is also the wish of a father, Zhonghua said seriously. He also liked Xiao Han, and Xiao Han was also worthy of his son. Phew! Zhongqing let out a breath and agreed. Father, I will participate in the Dao Battle of the Nine Races as Lord Shaoqing of the Zhonghua race. Chapter 2264. Translator. Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation Slaughter Domain. Azura Phone. Azura, Yellow Spring, Guad, and Umo, the four god lords, stood side by side outside the palace. They looked up at the godly path light and watched Qin Hao leave. Qin Hao had only brought Zhan Wu and the other 8 perfect heavenly wheels to the reincarnation godly realm. He didn't even have a god general from the slaughter domain with him. Don't worry, said Yellow Spring. That kid from the Moonflow clan isn't weak. With his protection and Ruo Chu's reincarnation mirror, it shouldn't be too dangerous. Qin Hao wasn't weak anymore. He had a perfect great path and a 7-vein godly pulse. Now, he had regained control of space power and used it to activate the reincarnation mirror. If he wanted to leave, even if he ran into Tian Zhao, godly king, Qin Hao could escape with Yuan Jin's help. I hope so. Second brother, third brother, please follow us secretly for a while. Azura was still worried. Guad and Umo nodded. When they felt that the godly path light had completely left ancient nether territory, they rose into the air and swept out like a gust of wind. Azura is so nice to Chu-san. Lucio was touched and envious. Why? Don't you need to cultivate? Azura looked down at the dojo. His eyes were as cold as the abyss, making people shudder. Lucio and Long Miao both shuddered. They immediately flew out of the small town with the other sword cultivators and hid behind the light screen. Qin Hao had to bring the reincarnation mirror, just in case. Although Lucio and the others had temporarily lost the benefits of the reincarnation dojo, they couldn't neglect their cultivation. Meanwhile, after leaving the ancient underworld, Yuan Jin rode the Moonlight Divine Deer, followed by Qin Hao and the other 8. The group was shrouded in the sparkling moonlight, which made them look hazy. Their divine path aura was also completely blocked by the moonlight. Reaching forward, Yuan Jin pinched a frost leaf and threw it into the moonlight deer's mouth. As the deer chewed slowly, the group moved faster and faster. The heavenly wheels of the upper 9-layer godly clans are basically perfect. There are a few imperfect ones, but there are very few of them. Niece and son-in-law, it might take some effort for you to pass the 88 levels, but you should be able to do it. However, suppressing the upper 9 clans is not easy. On the way, Yuan Jin told Qin how about the upper 9 heavens. The upper 9 clans in the Heavy Flower realm were 2 races. The innate god clans. Immortal King Zhonghua's tribe and Moonflow clan had awakened from the chaos, and their bloodlines contained the power of primordial chaos. The difference was that Immortal King Zhonghua was born as a divine king, and every divine king in the primordial chaos was formed from the essence of chaos. Compared to the God King clan, the Moonflow clan was a little lacking in terms of essence. After all, the Moon Goddess Sky and God Lord Moonflow had not reached the God King level, but they were still sentient life forms that had existed since the beginning of the primal chaos. The second race was the postnatal god clans. The entire Heavy Flower realm, apart from the Heavy Hua and Moonlight clans, belonged to the postnatal god clans, including the other 7 clans of the upper 9 clans. They were influenced by the Tao will of innate god kings and were nurtured by the heavenly Tao. Even so, due to Immortal King Zhonghua's perfect Tao will of primordial chaos, there were still many perfect clans in the heavenly Tao. Over the long years, the Heavy Flower realm gradually became what it was today. Leaving aside the peak Immortal Kings from the 90th level to the 98th level, these 9 levels were the strongest 9 heavens. As expected of a true overlord of the wilderness, this is a true deity king-level faction. Qin Hao's heart thumped. Under the Immortal Kings, the 9 great celestial clans were perfect. Compared to the ancient Nether Realm, the Massacre 4 Realms was obviously inferior. Qin Hao knew that the ancient Nether Realm was only in name now. After the War of the Deity Kings, the innate Nether King had fallen, and many great gods had perished. Because of that, the ancient Nether Realm was split into 4 realms. In reality, it had become a crippled ancient Nether Realm. The Heavy Flower Realm was the peak of the Deity King faction. According to Brother Yuan Jin, the Heavy Flower Realm structure is even bigger than our War God clan. Zhang Wu was a little surprised. The Heavy Flower Realm was divided into 99 levels. The War God clan was divided into 72 cities. There were only 7 perfect deity kings among the branches. The Heavy Flower Realm had 2 more than the War God clan. Such a faction was probably only comparable to the Tianzhao Divine Realm under the Archean World's royal system. There were more than 100 divine lords under the Tianzhao Divine King and close to 10 perfect deity kings. Moreover, there were 4 divine sects that protected the divine realm. The talent and strength of the sect master and the disciples under him were all outstanding among the perfect deity kings. The Upper Star Palace's Yin Shuo, who had been defeated by Qin Hao, belonged to one of the 4 divine sects. If the Heavy Flower 9 clans are so strong, we have no chance of winning at all, Tiando suddenly said. The comparison was too imbalanced. Qin Hao also showed a serious expression. No. Yu Yuanjin shook his head and said, in this law battle, the cultivation of the descendants of the Heavy Flower 9 clans is not very high. Most of them are perfect like you. You don't have to be afraid of them. There are only 2 people you need to pay attention to. Who are they? Qin Hao asked. The youngest son of the Moon Flow clan's patriarch, Mochizuki. He has a perfect great Tao and 6 divine veins. The power of his will is at the Khanate level. The other one is more difficult to deal with. He is the only son of divine Lord Zhonghua, who is at the 98 levels above the Moon Flow clan. His name is Master Qing. He needs to pay attention to him. Yu Yuanjin looked back at Qin Hao. His eyes seemed to be telling him that Zhongqing would be a giant mountain between Qin Hao and Shaohan. 70,000 years of cultivation and 2 Khanate deities. Compared to Junimo, it's not too much. Qin Hao smiled bitterly. It was indeed difficult. Mochizuki and Zhongqing were both at the Divine Prince level. You can play Junimo to death. You won't be afraid, right? Yu Yuanjin said. If he was afraid, it was not too late to turn back now. I'll take care of these 2 people. Ah Wu and the others will deal with the other perfect heavenly wheels of the upper 9 clans. Mochizuki has 6 divine veins. It's not difficult. But Master Qing of the Heavy Flower 9 clans is really tricky. Fortunately, my cultivation is not weak. Qin Hao smiled. Not long ago, he had just broken through the 70,000 years of cultivation by regathering his divine force. Now, their cultivation was equal. You sound quite confident. I'm curious. How many divine veins do you have? Yu Yuanjin felt that the speed had slowed down. He picked up a frost leaf and threw it into the mouth of the moonlight divine deer. Immediately, his body moved wildly and the wind whistled in his ears. As for me, you'll know when the time comes. Qin Hao said mysteriously. Perhaps Yu Yuanjin still thought that his strength was still at the level of killing Junimo. Master Qing. I'll deal with Master Qing. Leave that Mochizuki to me. Zhang Wu said solemnly. Even if Qin Hao was strong, dealing with 2 Khanate deities would only increase his consumption. If it weren't for the fact that Zhang Wu's cultivation was too weak, Zhang Wu would have taken care of all the obstacles in front of Qin Hao by himself. The 70,000 years of Zhongqing's celestial Tao was 2 divine veins higher than Zhang Wu. He was indeed not someone that Zhang Wu could deal with. Are you serious? Qin Hao turned and looked at Zhang Wu. Zhang Wu nodded and said, don't forget, I also have the innate deity king's primordial battle intent in my body. In the past, Zhang Wu's Tianluan was broken, but now the divine origin realm allowed him to cultivate again. The divine wilderness original realm allowed him to cultivate a perfect Tianlun. Both of them belonged to the innate celestial race. The war deity king's primordial essence was even stronger than the moon flow celestial races. As a descendant of the deity king, even if his cultivation was 10,000 years weaker, Zhan Wu was still confident that he could defeat Mochizuki. Impressive. Qin Hao gave Zhan Wu her awesome look. Chapter 2265. Translator. Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation. Last time, the Divine King of Tianchao failed on the verge of success. Perhaps this made him realize that using the same tactic against Qin Hao would not work. After all, Qin Hao was not a fool. Therefore, this time, everyone went out uneasily, but it was a daunting experience. Following Yu Yuanjin, they safely arrived at the reincarnation divine realm. As far as the eye could see, this untainted land was different from the sword realm and the slaughter realm. It was full of boundless and holy qi. In front of him, there was a towering mountain whose peak could not be seen. The mountain was like a staircase that extended up layer by layer. Every layer was like a boundless sky, and countless continental plates of various shapes and sizes were hidden within. It was the 99 layers of reincarnation. At this time, circles of ripples were slowly spreading down along the void space at the top, like a rainbow, one ring after another, winding around the huge mountain. The divine power that these colorful rings exuded was extremely strong, giving people a suffocating sense of oppression and awe. It was as if as long as one touched it, anything would be instantly turned into dust. This is the protective enchantment formed by the will of the celestial king. Zhan Wu was very knowledgeable and immediately recognized it. Yes, it is the protective enchantment of the divine realm. It flows out from the 99 layers of reincarnation gate. If you want to break through the enchantment and go directly to the upper 9 layers, it is tantamount to courting death. Whether it is an outsider or a heavenly wheel of the reincarnation realm, they must go up one layer after another, Yu Yuanjin said solemnly. The enchantment was where the majesty of the celestial king lay. Even he could not violate it. It seems that we can only go up one layer at a time. Qin Hao said. Everyone looked serious. Although they all had perfect heavenly wheels, it was still a difficult challenge to go all the way from the lower worlds to the upper 9 layers. Good luck, nephew. I will wait for your arrival at the 97th layer of reincarnation realm. I hope it won't take too long. If the cultivation battle ends and little Han is married. Tisk, Yu Yuanjin laughed and said, I'll take my leave first. After saying that, he patted the moonlight god deers, and the mount turned into a beam of moonlight and rushed into the lowest layer of the realm light. Then, like a rapidly rising star, it directly passed through the layers of realm light and shot straight up from the inside. Everyone, are you ready? Qin Hao raised his head to look at the incomparably majestic immortal peak and took a deep breath. Zhan Wu directly took a step forward and shouted towards the light of the first heaven at the bottom of the immortal peak, Battle God Clan Zhan Wu, together with my brother Venerable Pill Clan Qin Hao, have specially come to pay a visit to the great elder of the 97th Heaven's Moonflow clan, Yushin Tian. I hope that the divine master guarding the first heaven will make things convenient for us and let us pass. Buzz. This roar reverberated through the air. Inside the first heaven, densely packed Tianlun flew out along with the sunlight. Like an army, they turned into a sea of people blocking the path ahead. If you want to go up to the 9th heaven, it will depend on your ability. A majestic voice responded, coming from inside the first heaven. The divine master guarding the lowest layer of the realm of heavenly splendor did not coldly refuse, but he also did not let them pass. Qin Hao silently looked at the 4 divine generals of the Wave Slayer. Immediately, the 4 wheels of the great path bloomed. His divine will was complete and formed a universe of its own. A beam of blade, aura, slashed out first. When the blade slashed out, It split into 9 streams of blade aura, carrying the power to split the sea and the waves. With just one slash, thousands of broken Tian Luan blocking the way were scattered. "Senior, do you think it is okay?" Qin Hao asked the divine master of the first heaven. "Let us pass." Buzz. The sunlight suddenly opened, revealing an extremely spacious gate. Qin Hao and the others looked at each other and smiled as they entered side by side. The divine master guarding the first heaven had imperfect Tianlun, and his cultivation was not even as good as Fenway's. He knew that he could not stop Qin Hao and the others. Most of the mortal Tian Luan under his command had 2 or 3 meridians. How could they stop them? However, resistance was still necessary. After all, the lower worlds needed to surround and protect the upper 9 heaven. Yu Yuanjin flew all the way. Listening to the frequent explosions in the lower heaven, he smiled. The lower 30 heavens of the realm of heavenly splendor can't stop you. It shouldn't take much effort from the 30th to the 60th heaven. But from the 60th to the 80th heaven, it won't be so easy. In the 99th heaven, the guarding divine clan was stronger than the one before, especially the 89th heaven. This was an extreme dividing line. The strength of the 89th heaven was enough to step into the upper 9 heaven, and was only slightly weaker than the upper 9 heaven. But from this heaven onward, the divine clan was perfect. I didn't expect Shura to be so attentive. He sent people to secretly escort them to the realm of heavenly splendor before silently returning to the slaughtering world. Chuckling in his heart, Yu Yuanjin felt that Shura was not as cold-blooded and heartless as the rumors said. He still had a little bit of humanity. But now, everything depended on the ability of Qin Hao and the others. The divine deer passed through the layers of sunlight. Enveloped by the moonlight, Yu Yuanjin's speed of ascending in a straight line was ridiculously fast. Along the way, no one stopped him. The various heavens tacitly allowed him to enter and leave freely. After all, he was riding the moonlight divine deer, which exuded the divine will of the 97th heaven of the Moonlight clan. In addition, he had a domineering aura that was close to that of a great god. His noble birth in the upper 9 heavens allowed Yu Yuanjin to have no worries in the lower worlds. In fact, he could use his identity to directly take Qin out of the upper 9 heavens, but Yu Yuanjin did not do so. And even if he was willing, Qin Hao would not agree. On this trip, it was not enough to resolve Xiao Han's dilemma. Qin Hao needed to gain the approval of the Moonlight clan, especially the approval of the moon god Sky. Then, breaking through the upper 9 heavens from the lower worlds, and completely breaking through the 97th heaven would show Qin Hao's sincerity in coming to see Xiao Han. It would also be a way for him to prove to the Moonlight clan that he was qualified as a son-in-law. Otherwise, if Yu Yuanjin took him up, the Grand Elder of the Moonlight clan would probably sneer at him. Yu Yuanjin rode all the way up, and along the way, he heard the cries of many young girls who were overflowing with love. Finally, he reached the upper 9 heavens. After passing through the 89th heaven and seeing dozens of young girls of the Shun clan faint because of him, Yu Yuanjin's Moonlight divine deer stepped through the gate of the heavenly path of Yuwutian. 90th heaven, Yuwutian. 91st heaven, Yu heaven. 92nd heaven, Xiao heaven. 93rd heaven, Chunwa heaven. 94th heaven, Xiao heaven. 95th heaven, Zhenghe heaven. 96th heaven, Supreme Harmony heaven. 97th heaven, Moonlight heaven. 98th heaven, Chonghua heaven. Chonghua was in the upper 9 heavens of the divine realm. These were the 9 strongest clans. Chapter 2266. In the 97th layer, Moonflow heaven was a scene of peace and holiness. A moonlight river with ripples of light flowed quietly. It had 9 bends and 18 bends as it flowed through the markets of various sizes. As far as the eye could see, white palaces stood in great numbers. The streets and pure white buildings were surrounded by moonlight grass, embellished with sparkling and translucent flowers. The most eye-catching part of the 97th layer was the sky. There was no sun, but there were 2 full moons. When the moonlight fell, one of the moons was even hotter than the sun. Its divine light was scorching hot. The other full moon was filled with extreme coldness. When its light fell, all things were covered in a thin layer of frost. The 97th layer was divided into two distinct parts by the light of the two moons. One half was scorching hot, the other half was cold. The scorching full moon represented God, Lord Moonflow. The cold moon was formed by First Elder Moonflow's Sciention power. After Yu Yuanjin returned to the clan, he dismounted from his deer mount and gently patted its head. The deer god dodged Yu Yuanjin's pat in disgust. With a long cry, it turned into white light and flew toward the cold moon, its divine intent fusing with it and vanishing. Yu Yuanjin chuckled, tapped the ground with the tip of his foot, and began to walk through the air. He frowned when he sensed an earth-shattering clamor in front of him, but then he immediately began to walk toward the source of the noise. He had not expected the Tao battle of the 9 races to have already begun. After passing through countless white palaces, the plaza at the center of the Moonflow race was filled with a hubbub of voices. The oval plaza was somewhat similar to the arenas of the ancient god era. The upper echelon of the 9 races, the participating disciples, and a small number of god lords from the lower worlds were all present, and there were no empty seats. At the center of the plaza was a depression. The ground was square and flat, and this was the main platform for the Tao battle of the 9 races. Seated around it, one could see the entire platform. Lord Xiao Wu, you're here. Lord Yo Wu, the 91st layer is below my realm. I didn't expect you to arrive first. The Moonflow race's first elder has kindly invited us. How could Lord Yo Wu dare to refuse? Ha ha ha. In the guest seating area, the 9 races' divine masters entered one after another and greeted each other. The atmosphere was harmonious and cordial. Unlike the easygoing attitude of the elders, the eyes of the elites of the 9 races that came to participate in the battle flickered with battle intent. Their emotions were extremely high as they all looked in the same direction. There, 2 white-haired, white-browed young men with shining moonlight marks on their foreheads sat upright on the lower right side of the main seat in the training hall. Their auras were extraordinary. The oldest of them was the Moonflow clan's first young master, Yu Shangqing, who had played the zither for Zhongqing in the Crown Prince's palace. The person beside Yu Shangqing had similar facial features. In comparison, his facial features were slightly younger, but his eyes hid arrogance. His aura was sharper than Yu Shangqing's. He was the Moonflow clan's young master, Mochizuki. Mochizuki had a perfect heavenly wheel and a 6-vein divine pulse. He was an extremely eye-catching top talent in this cultivation battle of the 9 races. He was also a common enemy that the youths of the 9 races were about to face. At this moment, the disciples of the 9 races were all looking at Mochizuki and whispering to each other. Their words were full of praise for Mochizuki. None of them belittled him. As an opponent, Mochizuki could be said to be one of a kind in terms of talent, attainment, and strength. He had pulled ahead of the other disciples of the 9 races by a large margin. Naturally, he was the center of attention. Not only were the disciples praising him, but the elders of the 9 races and the divine masters also agreed with the words of their descendants. If there were no restrictions and they fought to the death, Mochizuki would definitely be a terrifying existence that could wipe out all the disciples of the 9 races. If there was anyone who could compete with him, there was only one person in the 9 heavens. The grandson of the immortal king, Lord Qing of the 98th heaven, Zhongqing. However, with Zhongqing's status, identity, and temperament, he probably wouldn't participate in this cultivation battle. Thus, Mochizuki was basically sitting in the position of number 1. High heaven is the most perfect heavenly wheel in the 9 heavens. He possesses the power of pre-celestial, and his cultivation is also the highest amongst the juniors of the 9 races. If nothing unexpected happens, he will definitely take first place. Divine Lord Yo said, if the Moonflow clan's young master can take first place and marry Empyrean Divine's granddaughter, then both of them will possess the strength of the great Tao of the Moon. This will truly be a beautiful story of the 9 heavens. Divine Lord Xiaowu was very optimistic about this pair. After all, in terms of appearance, status, and talent, Mochizuki and Xiaohan could be called perfect. My righteous heaven will not admit defeat so easily. That's right. So is supreme harmony. Divine Lord, righteous heaven, and supreme harmony divine Lord said. Compared to Mochizuki, their descendants were only a single divine vein weaker. They had the strength to fight. Although this cultivation battle had been called by Empyrean Divine to find a husband for his granddaughter, this battle could also test the strength of the 9 clans. From the juniors of the 9 clans, they could see just how strong the 9 clans were. The upper 9 heavens hadn't held such a large-scale cultivation battle in a long time, so they were going all out. Right at this moment, between the 2 full moons in the sky, a gap opened up in the pure and holy moonlight, and a figure walked out from it. He wore a silver crown and a white fur coat, and when he walked, his temperament was ethereal. When this figure appeared, the 97th heaven, Tao Arena, fell silent. As everyone looked over, surprise flashed in their eyes. He, young Master Clearheart, had actually come from the lower realms of the 98th heaven. They saw Clearheart step on a pair of white shoes with golden edges. His steps were slow and light, and his transcendent face was calm and tranquil. Step by step, he walked over everyone's heads and landed on the main seat of the Tao Arena. Clearheart, young master, you've come. On the main seat, the 2 overlords of the Moonflow clan, Great Elder Clearheart and Patriarch Divine Lord Moonflow, stood up at the same time, smiling as they welcomed the master of the 98th heaven and his son. Empyrean Divine, Empyrean Clearheart, and Clearheart have brought their sons to join the fun and see just how strong our 9 clans are, ha ha ha. God Lord Clearheart loudly laughed. As he saw the other 8 clan masters stand up, he waved his hand. Everyone, please sit. Today, there is no need for us to exchange pleasantries. The 8 God Lords smiled at each other, nodded, and sat back down. Clearheart greets Empyrean Divine, Uncle Moonflow. Clearheart bowed to Clearheart and God, Lord Moonflow. Young master, old man is happy that you could come. Clearheart, who had always been tough and cold, was extremely amiable when facing young Master Clearheart. Take a seat first, God Lord Moonflow said. Please, Clearheart modestly said. Please. God Lord Moonflow indicated for the master of the 98th heaven to sit first. Although it wasn't known if the Clearheart god race had truly come to participate, 3 noble seats had been placed on the main seat. God Lord Clearheart sat on the right, God Lord Moonflow sat on the left, and Clearheart sat between the 2 great gods. Clearheart had invited the 9 clans to participate in today's Tao battle, and it was only natural that they would do so. With Clearheart's arrival, the 9 clans were in an uproar. Those eyes that had been looking at Mochizuki turned to young Master Clearheart. Yushanqing bitterly smiled as he saw this. As expected, the 98th heaven young master had still come. He hadn't expected that Clearheart's previous indifference to be an act. Thinking about it, even if Clearheart didn't care about Xiaohan, the Clearheart god race did. After all, she was the only person that the peak immortal king valued. But with Clearheart's arrival, Yushanqing could only mourn for his little brother. It would be difficult for Mochizuki to win this battle. Young master. Mochizuki was the first to speak to Clearheart. The moment Clearheart appeared, his expression turned serious. He could ignore all of his peers in the upper 9 clans, but Mochizuki had to pay attention to this young Master Clearheart. Shanqing, I heard from Clearheart that you're cultivating the second half of the Clearheart Immortal Sutra. The second half isn't suitable for you to comprehend at the moment. I suggest that you wait until you've developed your 7th meridian before studying it, Clearheart said. Although the Immortal Sutra had been created by the ancestor of the Clearheart Immortal King, the disciples of the 9 clans all had access to it. This was also why the 9 clans could dominate the upper 9 heavens. Similarly, this was also why the lower worlds kept trying to break through to the upper 9 heavens and replace them. However, Mochizuki's divine vein had 6 veins. Using his current cultivation to study the Clearheart Immortal Sutra was still a little too difficult. His foundation wasn't solid enough, and he would be easily injured by the Tao. My elder brother also advised me, but I think that as long as one's talent is enough, they won't go down the wrong path. Shouldn't my generation be like this? Mochizuki had a different opinion about this, and he was very firm in his beliefs. Boundaries were meant to be broken. The Celestial King had once said that only those with 7 veins of divine vein could read the second half. Only after breaking through the 100,000-year barrier could one read the second half, and become a great god could one read the first half. His goal was for the disciples of the 9 clans to strengthen their cultivation foundation. He was afraid that they would be injured by the principles of the Immortal Sutra. However, Mochizuki thought that his 6 veins of Tao were enough to cultivate the second half of the Immortal Sutra. Just because he was Mochizuki. Up to you. With clear heart and Uncle Uelu watching, there won't be any accidents. Anyway, you should still be careful, Clearheart said. Mochizuki nodded. He knew that young Master Clearheart was just concerned. The two of them only had a conflict of opinion about the Immortal Sutra, and it wouldn't affect their private relationship. Everyone, Moon Shintian shouted out loud. His face was solemn as he looked down. He said, I am deeply honored that the 9 clans are able to give me the honor of hosting this law battle. The goal of this battle is to test the current situation of the 9 clans. My 9 clans haven't fought a law battle in 100,000 years. Empyrean Divine has worked hard. On behalf of my 9 clans, let me offer a toast to Empyrean Divine. The Divine Lord of the highest harmony heaven raised his wine cup. Please. Moon Shintian raised his cup towards the Divine Lords of the 9 clans. Empyrean Divine, please. The Divine Lords of the 9 clans said. Moon Shintian immediately drank. The Divine Lords of the 9 clans and the elders all drank together. As the wine entered their throats, it ignited the heroic spirits of all the Divine Lords present. The high-level figures of the 9 clans all laughed heartily. Everyone knows that this sovereign is a person who acts swiftly and decisively, who does things in a straightforward and efficient manner. What I hate the most is being overly fussy and indecisive. Then, let the cultivation battle begin, Second Elder. Yu Shintian's dignified gaze looked towards a seat below the seating area. There, a white-haired old man stood up. He coughed twice and cleared his throat. Then he walked towards the center of the Tao field and stood on the Tao platform. Everyone, today is the grand ceremony of my 9 clans that has been held for 10,000 years. Because of Empyrean Divine's request, the old man will be presiding over the law battle ceremony. All participating disciples of the 9 clans, listen well. There are no rules to the law battle, and it will be conducted in a single loss format. You may challenge each other as you wish. The winner will continue, and the loser will lose the qualifications to fight again. Of course, exchanging pointers is exchanging pointers, not throwing away your lives. If any of you are too vicious and cruel, then after you return, be careful of being locked up as a Divine Lord. The Moonflow clan's second elder humorously said. Ha ha ha! The disciples of the 9 clans all laughed. They certainly understood this reasoning. The upper 9 heavens had always been competitors, but the 9 clans were also the closest of friends. They were like family, so it was naturally impossible for them to kill each other. Then, let's begin. The venue will be left to you. Old man must return to eat. As the second elder finished speaking, he hurriedly left the stage and returned to his seat. His comical appearance caused the juniors to laugh once more. I, Yu Wu Tian of the 90th heavens, Yu Han, challenge Yu Wu Tian of the 91st heavens. Sung. A figure rose up from the participant seating area. His entire body surged with brilliance as he landed in the center of the Tao field. His eyes were filled with fighting spirit as he stared in a certain direction. That direction was the lineup of the 91st heavens, Yu Wu Tian God Clan. Chapter 2267. The 90th layer was challenging the 91st layer. Yu Han, the son of Yu Wu, had a perfect Tian Luan and a 4-vein godly pulse. He was the best of the younger generation in the 90th layer. The higher-ups of the 9 clans were in an uproar. Yu Wu Tian had sent the young master to fight as soon as he arrived. He was determined to win. At that moment, in Yu Wu Tian's seat, the 91st layer god Lord looked at a young man next to him and said, "Go." "Yes, father," Yu Qian responded. With a stomp, he flew up from his seat and landed on the platform below. The two of them were at the same height as Yu Han's eyes met. Yu Qian, the young master of the 91st layer, the son of God Lord Yu Wu, had a perfect Tianluan and a 4-vein godly pulse. The 91st layer had sent Yu Han to fight. As the best of Yu Wu Tian's younger generation, it was obvious that he wanted to defeat the 91st layer. That day's law battle had a hidden meaning behind it, but it was also related to the 9 upper clans' prestige and status. The 91st layer naturally attached great importance to it. Therefore, they had sent the son of a god lord. "Yu Han, make your move." Yu Qian stretched out one hand, looking calm. Young master Yu Wu Tian chuckled. After that, his hand flashed, and a golden spear appeared in his hand. At that moment, his body was shining, and his Tianluan appeared. The Tianluan was dazzling. His godly intent was perfect. It covered his entire body and formed a universe. "Look at my spear." Yu Han looked stern. He flicked his spear and created illusions. The spear pierced through the air, trying to kill his opponent's godly source. The young master of the 91st layer, Yu Qian, nodded slightly. That spear was full of power and Yu Han's 4-vein godly force. Then, Yu Qian released light from his body. Green light spread out and surrounded his body. It condensed into a picture behind him. The picture was lush and verdant. At that moment, Yu Qian was like an ancient pine tree standing on the stage. He was like the king of the forest, dominating all the creatures in the forest. Ding! Pointing his finger forward, Yu Qian gathered his divine wheel power at the tip of his finger and clashed head-on with the incoming golden divine spear. Immediately after, Yu Qian felt a vigorous force shaking his body. He was actually pushed back dozens of feet by the impact of the golden divine spear, and his feet slid along the stage. What a fierce attack! The 91st layer is already at a disadvantage. Is Yu Wu Tian going to replace him? On the guest seats, the elders of the 9 clans were watching the battle solemnly. Similarly, they had a perfect heavenly wheel and 4 veins of divine pulse. As the son of a divine master, Yu Gan was actually pushed back by Yu Han's spear. Yu Gan silently chanted a series of obscure divine techniques. He formed a seal with his palms, and the shadow of the desolate ancient pine tree that enveloped his body flew out. It was like a green mountain that crushed down. At this moment, the entire training ground was shaking as it directly descended on Yu Han's head. "Shatter!" Yu Han roared, and the divine power of all 4 meridians poured into the golden pillar in his palm. He pushed his palm to the bottom, and an incomparably huge pillar of light rose up into the sky with a rumbling sound. It violently collided with the descending green pine tree. Rumble! Amidst a shocking explosion, the golden light shattered under the pine tree, and the 5-finger-like knotted old roots clamped down like a palm pressing down on Yu Han's body. He roared again and again, and the sky wheel was pushed to the limit. However, it couldn't withstand the suppression power contained in the pine tree. With the sound of the wheel shattering, Yu Han was pressed to the ground by the pine tree, unable to struggle. Good. Wonderful. As expected of the Yu Wu clan, victory was decided in one battle, and the entire training ground was filled with cheers. Yu Gan smiled slightly when he saw this. He waved his hand to disperse the will of the ancient pine tree and released Yu Han. Then, he took 2 steps forward and pulled Yu Han up from the ground. "You brat, can't you go easy on me? You know that I can't beat you. Can't you let me show off a bit more and then give me a decent end?" Yu Han said angrily. "You asked me to use my full strength." Yu Gan's expression was bitter, as if he had satisfied Yu Han's request, but it turned out that he was wrong. Yu Han drew a circle in front of him and muttered a few words, then stepped down from the stage and returned to his seat. Yu Han had lost this battle, and he was disqualified from fighting again. Although Yu Wutian could still send other people to fight, it seemed that he wouldn't continue to do so. After all, Yu Han was already the strongest cultivator of this generation. Congratulations, Yu Wutian wins. The second elder of the Moon Flow clan, who was hosting the law battle ceremony, didn't even leave his seat. He cheered as he ate, without any professional ethics. Hearing this, Yu Gan smiled and bowed to the higher-ups of the 9 clans. He didn't leave right away. Instead, he looked at one place. That place was the seat of the 92 leaders of the Shun clan, the Xiaowu clan. He was going to challenge the Xiaowu clan. Is the battle over? Looks like I've made a mistake. At this moment, a voice came from afar. Yu Gan turned his head, and his eyes lit up. He raised his hand and shouted excitedly, "Brother Yuanjin, Brother Yuanjin." The person who had come was Yu Yuanjin, who had returned from the lower worlds to the 9 upper worlds. Yu Yuanjin was the son of the first elder, Yu Shintian. His celestial wheel was perfect, and he had broken through the barrier of 100,000 years of cultivation. He had reached the great god realm, and could be said to be the strongest cultivator of this generation. Even Yu Shangqing, who had cultivated for 90,000 years, and Lord Qing, the grandson of the celestial king, were inferior to Yu Yuanjin. Yu Yuanjin was not only the pride of the Moonflow clan, but also the pride of the 9 upper clans. In the entire reincarnation divine realm, there was no girl who didn't admire him, and no boy who didn't worship him. After all, half of Yu Yuanjin's body had already squeezed into the great god level. In the endless primitive era, great gods were the strongest below god kings. Yu Gan naturally yearned for the great god realm, so he was also one of Yu Yuanjin's admirers. Alas, this elder brother of his was rarely seen, and his whereabouts were uncertain. It was rare to see him in the 9 upper worlds. Today, Yu Yuanjin's appearance in the Dao tournament of the 9 clans had truly shocked everyone. "Boy Yuanjin, you're late. Drink a cup as punishment." God Lord Chong Hua's violet robes fluttered, and the cup on the table flew away, wrapped in divine power. Yu Yuanjin had just arrived at the training ground when he reached out to catch it. He felt the immense power of a great god fill the cup in his hand. His body swayed, but he managed to dispel it. "Thank you, Uncle Chonghua." After saying this, Yu Yuanjin drained the cup in one gulp, picked up the cup, and placed it back respectfully in front of God Lord Chonghua. Clan leader, father, Yu Yuanjin bowed slightly to God Lord Yuelu and Yu Shintian. Not bad. Yuanjin's control of the primordial Tao is becoming more and more proficient, God Lord Yuelu said with satisfaction. God Lord Moonflow smiled in satisfaction. Just now, he had noticed that Chonghua had thrown out a wine cup to test Yu Yuanjin, but this kid had been pressed down by the primordial Tao intent of the great god, but he had quickly dispersed the force. This was proof that his foundation was extremely firm. "Find a place to sit." Yu Shintian's expression didn't change much as he spoke sternly. Yu Yuanjin silently nodded, but then he saw Yu Shangqing waving at him from the right side of the main seat. A rare smile appeared on Chongqing's noble face. The two of them clearly wanted Yu Yuanjin to sit over there. "Shangqing, why haven't you broken free of your shackles and charged past the 100,000-year barrier? You're far too weak. And you, Chongqing, besides your face growing paler and paler, you don't seem to be making any progress at all. I'm ashamed to be associated with the two of you." Yu Yuanjin feigned disdain for the two of them, lifted his robes, and ran to the left side of the main seat. This seat was occupied by Yu Yuanyu and Xiao Han. The place wasn't small, but there were very few seats. Thus, the mother and daughter seemed very lonely, exuding a sense of powerlessness. It was like they were goods on a shelf, placed before the 9 clans. "Sister, I'm back." Yu Yuanjin sat beside Yu Yuanyu obediently. He didn't forget to take a fruit from the fruit plate and put it in his mouth to eat. Yu Yuanyu answered casually. On the other side of her, Xiao Han's eyes were dim. She lowered her head from time to time, looking out of place with the lively atmosphere of the 9 clans. "Not only am I back, but I also brought my niece-in-law to the reincarnation divine realm. Now he started to fight his way up, one heaven after another. I estimate that he's about to break through the 30th heaven by now. Yu Yuanjin's voice was extremely low, as if he was communicating with the two of them through divine thoughts. Yu Yuanyu and Xiao Han's bodies suddenly trembled. Hearing this, their expressions suddenly changed. Qin Hao had come to the reincarnation divine realm. Are you kidding? Yu Yuanyu grabbed Yu Yuanjin's arm and asked in shock. Uncle, don't try to make me happy. Xiao Han knew that Qin Hao was currently in the slaughter world to protect himself. Yu Yuanjin had told her when he came back last time. The ancient nether realm and the reincarnation divine realm were located in the two major directions of the untainted land. Once Qin Hao left the slaughter world, he would inevitably be hunted down by immortal King Tianzhao. The risk he took was too high, and it was easy for accidents to happen. I'm not lying to you. Forget it, just wait and see. Soon, someone from the lower world will come to report. At that time, you'll know that I'm telling the truth. Yu Yuanjin grabbed another fruit from the seat and looked at the Taoist field in the center. You want to have a cultivation battle? I'm afraid that the 9 clans won't be stable in the future. Chapter 2268. Translator. Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation Translator. Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation. Qin Hao's arrival made Xiao Han both surprised and nervous. Although he hadn't been attacked by the divine King Tianzhao, it would be extremely difficult for Qin Hao to reach the 9th heaven. There were 89 heavens in between, and there were countless divine races guarding them. Qin Hao would have to punch his way through. Xiao Han's nose twitched as she imagined the scene. She held back her tears. Qin Hao had crossed the untainted land and risked his life to come here, all for her. Yu Yuanyu loosened her grip on Yu Yuanjin's arm. She took a deep breath and calmed herself down. Unlike Xiao Han's worries, Yu Yuanyu was more excited. For 1,000 years, she had heard Xiao Han talk about Qin Hao's deeds. She couldn't even see her son-in-law. Today, Qin Hao had personally come to the reincarnation divine realm and risked being attacked by the divine kings. He fought his way up from the lower worlds, wanting to break through the 98 heavens and reach Xiao Han. This courage and boldness was rare in the world. Putting everything else aside, Qin Hao had fought his way up to the 9th heaven for Xiao Han. It was enough to see that he was a man who valued friendship. With this kind of heart, no matter what he looked like, even if he was a pig, Yu Yuanyu felt that he had passed. What was the use of being good-looking? It was useless if he didn't treat her daughter well. Compared to a beautiful appearance, her mother-in-law valued a kind heart more. She really wanted to see Qin Hao now. At this moment, Yu Shantian quietly glanced at them from the main seat. Primordial Chaos God's senses were extremely sharp. He instantly sensed the changes in the emotions of Xiao Han and her daughter. However, Yu Shantian didn't know what was going on. He was still focused on the law battle of the 9 clans. Yuanjin has a free and unfettered nature, and he likes to travel the myriad worlds. In recent years, he has frequently returned to his clan. He has relied on his elder sister since he was young, so he wouldn't be up to any tricks behind my back, right? Yu Shantian's gaze returned to the training grounds, as he found it difficult to calm himself down. He was born in the chaos. Although he wasn't a divine king, he was still an innate divine spirit. Yu Yuanyu and Yu Yuanjin were Dao spirits nurtured by his will of Dao. They didn't have a mother. When Yu Yuanjin first opened his divine sense, he mistook Yu Yuanyu, who was 1,000 years older than him, as his mother. Thus, this brat was especially fond of his older sister, and Yu Shantian had even felt that this kind of care and concern had surpassed the care and concern he had for his older sister. Especially as Yu Yuan advanced to the divine path and became stronger and stronger, he already had the embryonic form of a great god. The cultivation battle continued. The Yuewu clan was defeated, and Yu Qian was victorious. He was excited for a long time before he broke free from the joy of Yu Yuanjin returning to the upper 9 clans. Then, he had to work even harder. Yu Qian of the 91st level, challenged the 92nd level heaven. Yu Qin shouted. His restrained divine will became especially restless when Yu Yuanjin appeared. Even his eyes flashed sharply when he looked at the Xiao Wu clan. It was for no other reason than that Yu Yuanjin, the proud genius of the upper 9 clans, was sitting on the stage and looking at him. "Layer, go," Xiao Wu said to his son. Xiao Lei, the son of a 92nd level god lord, had a perfect heavenly wheel and a 4-vein divine vein. He was on par with Yuhan, who had been defeated, and Yu Qian, who was on the stage. "Yes, father," Xiao Lei answered. Xiao Lei nodded and stood up. His purple gold hair that was standing upside down started to emit streaks of lightning. Dong! Xiao Lei stepped into the center of the dojo. His skin color was different from normal people's. The Xiao Wu clan's members had light purple skin, which looked especially tough and tough. Moreover, Xiao Lei was tall and sturdy. He was 3 heads taller than Yu Qian. His upper body was bare, and his light purple skin was surrounded by lightning. When he stood there with his legs, he naturally carried an extremely strong pressure. Xiao Lei flashed 2 rows of white teeth at Yu Qian. His right hand reached behind his back and pulled out a large purple copper hammer. The round head of the hammer was engraved with ancient patterns. When his muscular arm held the divine hammer, his entire body overflowed with a wild aura. "Xiao Lei, I want to take out all." Yu Qian was about to speak. All of a sudden, a beam of light as sharp as an arrow pierced through the light from the 96th heaven and into the 97th heaven, heading straight for the dojo. Panic cries could be heard from afar. The 38th level auspicious star heaven of the lower worlds requests an audience with the upper 9 levels godlords. "This is bad. This is bad." The voice was extremely anxious and mixed with uncontrollable panic. When it came out, it was like a torn rag. It was exceptionally mournful and attracted the attention of all the upper 9 clans. Yu Qian heard this, and the words he was about to speak were stuck in his throat. He turned around with a puzzled frown. Normally speaking, even if something major happened in the lower worlds, it wouldn't be enough to directly rush through the 89th level and reach the upper 9 levels, unless the situation was so severe that the 89th level could no longer be restrained. "Why are you in such a panic? What has happened in the auspicious star heaven?" Godlord Zhonghua lightly said, his expression dignified. Plop! The beam of divine light crashed into the dojo. It seemed that rushing here from the lower realms had exhausted all of this person's divine strength. He looked up with disheveled hair and knelt down in fear. Reporting to God Lord Zhonghua and the other god lords, a cultivator by the name of Qin has arrived in the lower realms. He claims to be bringing his wife home and requests an audience with Empyrean Divine. He does not have a letter from Empyrean Divine, nor does he have a token from the Moonflow clan, so we of the lower realms cannot let him pass. But this person's face was full of humiliation. Facing the god lords of the upper 9 clans, he found it hard to speak. "But what? Speak," God Lord Zhonghua said in a low voice. "We can't stop him. He swept his way from the first celestial layer. With the perfect heavenly wheel protecting him, no one could withstand a single exchange. Just as this little god was about to arrive, that Qin had already brought his men to fight their way to the 36th celestial layer. Soon, they will fight their way to our 38th celestial layer. I informed the god lords of the 80th heavenly layer of this matter, but they said that they were making a fuss over nothing. As long as that thief dared to come, they would have him experience the ferocity of the heavy splendor divine realm. But this little god feels that even those above the 80th heavenly layer will find it difficult to stop Qin Hao's momentum. This little god isn't exaggerating, but none of the god lords of the middle 30 heavenly layers believe me. It was precisely because he had seen it with his own eyes that he could better judge the strength of the invaders. Even if it was a Shun clan above the 80th tier, it was very likely that they would be defeated by him. This was because the Tianlun brought by Qin Hao are all perfect. He wants to visit Empyrean Divine and claims to be bringing his wife home. God Lord Heavy Splendor subconsciously looked at Great Elder Moon Shintian. These words were enough to prove many things. I understand. You may return. Moon Shintian's expression didn't change. He waved his hand towards the auspicious star heaven god. But Empyrean Divine, don't worry about him. Didn't you see that the upper 9 heavenly layers are holding a law battle? Let him perish on his own. Moon Shintian didn't care about this at all. No wonder Yu and Xiao Han's moods had fluctuated as soon as Yu Yuanjin returned. It was because they had lured Qin Hao to the heavy splendor divine realm. However, if one wanted to step into the upper 9 heavenly layers, it wasn't something that could be done in a single move or two. Moon Shintian believed that the auspicious star heaven wheels were a bit exaggerated. After all, he had seen Qin Hao and knew what his cultivation was. The quality of the heavenly wheels was indeed good. They were perfect. But how could someone with a mere 10,000 years of cultivation reach the upper 9 heavenly layers? Even if one had guardian powerhouses by their side, even if they were ordinary sword cultivators from Sword World, even if a divine lord from Sword World came here, let alone the upper 9 heavenly layers, they wouldn't even be able to pass the middle 30 heavenly layers. This little god bids farewell. The little god, guarding auspicious, star heaven saw Empyrean Divine's disdainful expression and helplessly sighed. He turned and flew away from the Dao field in disappointment, returning to the lower realms. Everything he said was true. He was hoping that the upper 9 heavenly layers would send out a perfect heavenly wheel to suppress Qin Hao. However, whether it was Divine Lord Heavy Splendor, Empyrean Divine, or even the divine lords of the upper 9 heavenly layers, none of them believed his words. They didn't even care. What could the auspicious Star Heaven clan do? The law battle continues. Moon Shintian loudly said, his complexion as calm as ever. The divine lords and elders of the upper 9 heavenly layers quickly regained their calm. It was as if those from auspicious Star Heaven had never come. Even they didn't believe that Qin Hao had the ability to reach the upper 9 heavenly layers. Xiaolei, I'm going to attack. I'm going to use my full strength, Yugon said. The Pine Sea and Forest Shard appeared once more. Above his body, the phantom of an ancient, desolate pine tree appeared. The heavenly wheel erupted, the fluctuations of divine intent especially intense. Bring it on. Xiaolei grasped the purple-copper divine hammer. He swung it forwards, drawing out a thick bolt of lightning that struck the ancient, desolate pine tree above Yugon. In an instant, the young masters of the 91 heavenly layers and the 92 heavenly layers began to fight. Within the Dao field, the pine trees furiously surged. It was like a strong wind was blowing up pine needles like rain. Mixed with the roar of purple-gold divine thunder, the scene was extremely intense. The high-level figures of the upper 9 heavenly layers were savoring immortal delicacies as they watched the law battle. The power of Xiao Lei's cultivation method was extremely ferocious, slightly stronger than Yuhan's. But the 91 heavenly layers Yugen's control over his divine techniques was extremely mysterious. He was able to draw out Xiao Lei's attacks, taking the initiative to advance and parrying attacks. He was actually able to play around with the 92 heavenly layers young master. In terms of divine strength, cultivation, and the grade of the heavenly wheel, the two were evenly matched. Compared to the killing power of divine strength, the Xiao Wu clan's Thunderhammer was far more invasive and destructive. But Yugon was no ordinary individual. It was hard to say who would win or lose in this battle. The 91 heavenly layers young master bless heaven divine art is used in a rather tricky manner. He is a smart little fellow. Little Han, who do you think will win? You grabbed a fruit core and ate it with relish. His previous gloomy mood disappeared, and he began to enjoy the law battle of the 9 heavenly layers. It's really hard to say. Xiao Han glanced at the training ground. In all fairness, there were no weaklings among the 9 heavenly layers. Yugon and Xiao Lei had the same cultivation and heavenly wheel, but one was good at techniques, and the other was good at physical strength. Their great Daos were different. Victory or defeat would depend on luck. Who could seize the opponent's loophole? Even the slightest mistake would cause the balance to tilt. However, Xiao Han's current thoughts were not on the law battle of the 9 heavenly layers. Qin Hao's arrival made her both surprised and worried. When she heard the report from the auspicious Star Deity clan, her heart was in her throat. It was not easy to make it all the way to the upper 9 heavenly layers. Especially the people sitting in this training ground were the strongest of the 9 heavenly layers. From the divine masters and elders to the divine sons of each clan, all of their heavenly wheels were perfect. Looking at the fierce battle between Yugan and Xiao Lei, it was clear how powerful the 9 heavenly layers were. Moreover, the most talented ones had yet to make a move. Mochizuki, Zhongqing, and the others were all innate god clans. Even if Qin Hao really made it here, what should he do? One must know that Mochizuki and Zhongqing still had the moon deity sky above them. If Qin Hao wanted to take his wife home, how could he break through these obstacles of the god clans? Other than feeling heartache, Xiao Han did not know what to do with Qin Hao. However, the ancient pine tree in the pool stood tall. As the young master of the 91st layer, Yu Qian's ability was on par with Xiao Lei's, even though they were in the 92nd layer. Neither of them was weaker than the other. This battle lasted for a long time. In the end, Yu Qian used the ancient pine tree to suppress Xiao Lei, just like how he suppressed Yu Wuqian and Yu Han. Xiao Lei could not get up. The ancient pine tree's old roots were like giant hands pressing down on Xiao Lei's burly body. No matter how hard he struggled, he could not break free. "I lost," Xiao Lei said sadly. Xiao Lei said sorrowfully. The divine light on his body had completely dissipated, and he had exhausted all of his divine power. The hammer in his hand had also fallen far away. His seemingly incomparably sturdy purple skin was riddled with eye-catching bloodstains, and the pine roots were about to sink into his flesh. Phew! Yu Qian exhaled heavily. His clothes were already soaked in sweat. When he heard Xiao Lei admit defeat, he, who was about to collapse, immediately put away his life spirit, the ancient pine tree, and the light of the wheel returned to his body. It was not easy for him to win this battle. If Xiao Lei had struggled a little longer, Yu Qian felt that the pine tree's roots would have been broken. If that had happened, he would have been the one to lose. This battle was extremely difficult. I won by luck. Yu Qian bent down weakly and stumbled to Xiao Lei's side. He pulled the exhausted Xiao Lei up and looked up at the 93rd layer of Chun Wu heaven. Helplessly, Yu Qian withdrew his gaze. It was already difficult to defeat Xiao Lei. Even if he had won, it was impossible for him to defeat Chun Wu heaven now. Congratulations. Xiao Lei picked up the divine hammer next to him. He looked disappointed, but he did not hold a grudge. He was indeed one step behind Yu Qian. You're also very powerful. The great path thunder body of the Xiaowu god clan is indeed shocking. No one in the world can break it. I exhausted all my divine power and could only trap you, Yu Qian said helplessly. His eyes were full of encouragement. Even if Xiao Lei lost, he had received sufficient recognition. Both of you performed well, but there can only be one winner. Congratulations to the 91st layer, Yu Heaven, for winning. The second elder of Moon, Flo, stuffed a goose leg in his mouth. His beard was greasy from eating. The elders of the 9 clans nodded. As they discussed, they praised Yu Qian and Xiao Lei's performance. Unfortunately, as the second elder of Moonflow clan said, there could only be one winner. The 91st layer Yu Qian actually defeated the 92nd layer Young Master. 2 wins in 2 battles. This was indeed admirable. Apart from being gratified, the elders of the various clans could not help but worry for the Xiaowu clan. They saw the rise of the Youwu clan from the younger generation. Chapter 2270. Before Yugan and Xiao Lei started fighting, The auspicious star sky elder came to report that Qin Hao had reached the 35th layer. And now, Yugan and Xiao Lei had just decided a victor, and they had already reached the 54th heaven. In the training ground, the divine lords of the 9 clans were surprised. This speed was fast. Continue. Yu Shintian glanced at the Jade Wave elder with a cold expression. The elder of the Bibo clan sighed, bowed to the god lords, and took the initiative to leave the dojo. Yu Shintian's attitude was clear. Today, the Dao battle of the 9 clans was the most important, and he did not care about the lower realm. Looks like this Qin Hao is indeed outstanding in some aspects. I heard that he fought with the divine prince of the Tianzhao divine realm, and the great Dao sword realm used the entire divine realm to protect him. Regardless of success or failure, his courage is commendable. No wonder he dares to come to our heavy, splendor divine realm. Sigh, there is no need to care about him. I heard that when he fought with divine prince Junimo, he only had one divine vein. Even if the great Dao sword realm has a perfect heavenly wheel that is close to the divine lord realm as his protector, it is impossible for him to reach the upper 9 layers. In the seats, the elders of the 9 clans were whispering. The protector they were talking about was a martial lord. The heavy splendor divine realm was a divine king level force, and they did not pay much attention to the small divine realms, especially the upper 9 clans. They had noble blood flowing in their veins, and 90% of them had perfect heavenly wheels. Their innate sense of superiority made them only see forces of the same level. How could they have thought about Qin Hao's good fortune? Even Yu Yuanjin had followed him for 1,000 years before he heard some information from a brothel in the Cloud Pool Divine Realm. After learning about the massacre in the Divine Realm, he finally found Qin Hao's whereabouts. The death of Junimo and the crippling of Tamanaji's cultivation had become a disgrace to the Tianzhao celestial race and the Yunzhe celestial race. The news was sealed by the 2 deity kings, and only their inner circle knew about it. The owner of the brothel was originally from a branch of the Yu family. Because she admired Yu Yuanjin's elegance, something wonderful happened between the two of them. In their infatuation, the woman accidentally let it slip. After that, Yu Yuanjin learned the news and left directly, leaving the beauty secretly sad. Let's continue. Which level of the pure martial sky are you planning to challenge? God Lord Zhonghua's expression was normal, but he had heard the discussions below in detail. I, Chuanwu Sky, challenged the 94th layer of Lesser Harmony Sky. In the training hall, a sturdy man with a rough face and a black beard pointed at Xiao Hitian's seat. Not only would it increase their combat experience, but it would also allow them to understand their own strengths and weaknesses, as well as which aspect of cultivation they should focus on in the future. He saw the pure harmony sky man and the Shaoa heaven god lord's daughter exchange blows. As they clashed, they fell into a frenzy, their battle becoming extremely violent. The large man's divine bloodline was weaker than his opponent's by a single mark, but this single bloodline wasn't enough to cause an imbalance between the 2 perfect heaven wheel masters. In comparison, the Shaoa clan held a slight advantage. Just like before, the pure harmony sky man was skilled in physical combat. He wielded a 9-foot-long divine saber that was incomparably tyrannical and unstoppable. As for the Shaoha clan's god lord's daughter, her techniques were similar to Yugen's. She was proficient in divine arts, but the difference was that Xiaoya was calmer and more experienced than Yugan. When she saw an opportunity, her divine talisman attacks were like a storm. As the god lords of the 9 clans watched, they would shake their heads and chuckle from time to time. Who would have thought that such a beautiful girl would be so bold and unrestrained? Her repeated attacks caused the pure harmony sky man to complain incessantly. Only Yu and Yu found Xiaoya's style to be quite interesting and appreciative. Suddenly, a beam of divine light pierced through the lower realms, falling straight towards the Dao field. It turned into a distressed figure that rushed into the battle, nearly being struck by Xiaoya's divine talisman and the large man's saber light. What is it now? God Lord Zhonghua frowned. He waved his hand. indicating for Xiaoya and the Pure Harmony Sky Man to pause. Reporting to God Lord Zhonghua, fellow God Lords and elders, a madman called Qin Hao has arrived in the lower realms. I know. Speak, what level is he at? Moon Xintian was impatient. He had carefully planned this Dao war between the 9 clans, but now it was being disrupted again and again. This was truly disappointing. Reporting to Empyrean Divine, he has reached the 66th level and is no longer a match for him. I asked that the 9 clans quickly send out perfect heavenly wheels to stop him. The intruder implored. In front of him was the auspicious Star Clan, and behind him was the Blue Wave Clan. He believed that the God Lords present already knew of this matter, but they simply didn't care. Now, Qin Hao and his accompanying heavenly wheels had swept through the 9 clans and reached the 66th level. Their momentum was fierce, and they couldn't be underestimated. 66th level. God Lord Zhonghua revealed a solemn expression as he looked towards Moon Xintian. Moon Xintian's 2 white eyebrows twisted together. His expression changed several times as he fell in a deep thought. From the 55th level to the 66th level, there's an entire 11 heavens between them. Reporting the 88th level of heaven has been broken. Reporting the 89th layer has encountered a group of madmen barging in. The young patriarch is currently engaged in a battle with a perfect heavenly wheel that uses a spear. After just 3 exchanges, he is unable to hold on. The situation is critical. I implore the divine masters of the upper 9 layers to quickly send divine generals to help. Buzz. Another 2 spheres of divine light flew over, rising from the lower realm, kneeling at the center of the 9 clans Dao, right under everyone's watchful eyes. Before the 88 divine masters could even open their mouths to speak, they heard a puff sound. An immortal jade sprayed out from the 89 divine masters' mouths and landed in front of their seats. At this moment, the entire dojo fell silent. In the silence, a cold wind seemed to sweep past every upper echelon of the 9 clans, causing their hair to stand on end. This was too fast. When the burly man of Chuanwu Heaven fought with Xiao, he heavens Xiao ya halfway through. Qin Hao had only reached the 66th layer. In the blink of an eye, he had already reached the 89th layer. The withered glory clan of the 87th layer was unable to stop him. The young patriarch had been knocked unconscious by a single punch. As for the young patriarch of the 89th layer, he had a true, perfect heavenly wheel. Even among the younger generation of the upper 9 clans, he had the qualifications to sit on the same level as them. However, Qin Hao himself did not make a move. Instead, a heavenly wheel that used a spear stood beside him and suppressed the young patriarch of the 89th layer in 3 exchanges. Even if he had not yet been defeated, the hearts of the upper echelons of the 9 clans were fiercely clenched. Could it be that they had really underestimated Qin Hao's strength? In the end, under their underestimation, they discovered that the clown had actually become one of the 9 clans. Shame, this is a great shame for my divine recapture realm. Someone charged all the way from the lower realm to the 89th layer in just a few hours. Moreover, the person who charged in does not belong to the faction of a divine king, but a group of heavenly wheels that were pieced together. If this were spread out, wouldn't my divine recapture realm become the laughingstock of all the divine kings? The elders of the 9 clans were all extremely vexed and could not help but sigh. In addition to their sorrow, there was also a ball of suppressed fire burning in their chests. How could it be so fast? Divine Lord Zhonghua frowned, finding it hard to understand. If the time that Qin Hao had used to reach the 66th layer was considered normal, then the journey from the 66th layer to the 89th layer could be said to have been completed in an instant. When Yuhan took 2 steps back, Qin Hao and his group of 9 perfect heavenly wheels were already standing side by side in front of him. Based on the divine will that had spread out from the attack, just now, Yu Han stared at Tian Do. That was just a small test. Tian Do blew on his palm and said casually. Yu Han's eyes gradually darkened. His gaze swept across the faces of the 9 people one by one. Because he had never seen Qin Hao before, he could not recognize who it was. However, there were 9 perfect heavenly wheels in front of him now. None of them had a divine will that was weaker than his. It was to the extent that one of the 9 gave him an unfathomable feeling. That aura made him feel a deep sense of powerlessness. Yu Han rarely encountered such a feeling, and it only appeared when he was facing young Master Qing and Yu Shanqing. Even when facing Mochizuki in front of Yu Han, he did not feel powerless. He had 4 veins of the divine pattern. Even if he fought with Mochizuki, who had 5 veins of the divine pattern, he still had the ability to fight. Of course, the chances of him losing were higher. However, if he faced Qin Shaojun and Yu Shanqing, it would not be a matter of the chances of him losing. It would be a definite defeat. At this moment, Yu Han could not imagine that among the 9 people, there was actually a terrifying existence that was comparable to the Chongqing. No wonder you could defeat everyone and fight your way to the upper 9 heavens. I can't stop you. The others can go. You stay. Yu Han pointed at Tian Do. His eyes flashed with a strong desire to battle. Tian Do's fate spirit and heavenly wheels were similar to his, and they both used divine spears. He wanted to see if he was stronger or if his opponent was stronger. Thank you. Qin Hao nodded slightly at Yu Han. Yu Han only stopped Tian Do and let the others pass. Firstly, he understood the situation very well. Secondly, it was not difficult to see the breadth of mind of the geniuses of the upper 9 races. How is it? Are you confident? Do you want me to stay with you? Alu glanced at Tian Do. Tian Do waved his hand at the crowd. I alone am enough. The others could pass, but only he could not. Was this a case of picking on the weak? Yu Han's action was clearly telling Tian Do that among the 9 people, he was the weakest. You're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.